Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion about media and virtual production, any questions that you may have. The second hour, we usually spend a little bit more time on something special. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Office Hours 2.0. We've just started it. If you're in Mukana, you'll actually see the link a little bit further up. I posted it about 20 minutes ago. You can actually see a 4K version of Office Hours with super sources and everything. It doesn't run perfectly yet, but we're getting there. And so we're testing that as we go. And we'll probably test it for about the next 1 to 2 weeks before we actually start really making it the main feed. So we'll be constantly kind of tweaking it until then. But today, our second hour, we're going to talk about what we like, don't like, ideas, things that we think are working, not working, all those things. And we're going to probably do that almost every week for the rest of the year as we really see how far we can push Mukana 2.0. Or not Mukana 2.0, but Office Hours 2.0. Tomorrow, we've got Universe. The developers of Universe are going to be joining us. I just talked to them a little earlier this morning. And so we're really excited to have them. Universe is a key piece of how we're actually running Office Hours 2.0. And so they're going to come in and talk about their software a little bit and how it works and answer your questions. Saturday is the long day. We've got education in 8 o'clock. It's not streamed to YouTube, so you need to be in Zoom. At 10 o'clock, we'll be once again cooking with Damayanti Gajar. And so I'm going to be setting up my system and getting ready to go. I'm threatening to set up a pretty big system. We'll see how it goes for Saturday. And then at noon, we'll have the Belfast Project with Todd Reynolds. So we'll be doing that at noon, from noon to 2. So it's a lot of fun on Saturday. All right, let's jump into the questions. Grant?
Good morning, everyone. Our first question comes from Jake Perrin from Rockford. Is there a way to remove delay when using iMag? This is my chain all over SDI. Canon C200S into a Blackmagic Video Hub, into a Blackmagic switcher, back into the Video Hub, and then off to a Christie laser projector.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, both the video hubs are just going to add less than a frame of delay, so it's negligible there. So I would say check your resolutions to see if there is some kind of processing going on from the camera to the switcher, or if the projector itself is doing any kind of weird scaling or anything like that would add some latency, because that should be very tight as long as there's no resolution, no processing going on to that image. So take a look at that. And I'd be curious to what your cable length is as well, because there could be something going on with the cabling.
Yeah, also Genlock. So if you Genlock everything together, you're going to save as much as, because the video hub should add almost nothing. The switcher, though, it may add up to a frame as it resyncs all the inputs coming in. But if everything that's going into it is Genlocked, you'll save a little bit of time there. And exactly to Guy's position, you can't have anything scaling. Scaling is going to cost you typically 2 or 3 frames as it goes through. So you want to think through that as you go forward. Next question.
Next question is from Jeff Francis. He says, can I safely play pre-recorded media clips, songs, movies, etc. in a private YouTube stream, in an unlisted stream, safely meaning without copyright strike or takedown?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Best practices would be no. It's not a good idea to test the fate of the YouTube overlords. I guess the quickest way I could explain this is when I used to be on radio, I never allowed anybody to curse in the room when the mic was off, because you never knew when the mic might be on. So that's always served me very well. No cursing, no copyrighted material.
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, here, the copyright strike is a manual process, and the copyright claim is the automatic one where the content ID would potentially pick these up. I believe on a private stream, you can get flagged, but it won't. It's less likely to get a copyright strike off it because it was a private one. The unlisted one is in effect the same as a public stream. So all the rules that follow for public ones fall for unlisted. It's just not being showed. That's my understanding of it.
My understanding, and I haven't tested it for a while, but my understanding is that private is not part of the copyright machine. So it's really there for testing and so on and so forth. And so I have never seen anything ever get flagged on a private stream as long as it stays private. The best way to test it is actually to upload the files that you want to play out into your live stream. When you go through the upload process, YouTube now has added a check system. So it'll tell you, hey, this is going to be flagged, and this is how it's going to be flagged if you throw something up there. And that's usually a good way to just know what it's going to do. If it's just going to flag it, then just play it. It's just strikes you want to worry about. Especially if you're private, you're not trying to generate revenue from it. The only thing the flag really affects is it'll demonetize that video. And so for people who are making money with YouTube, the flags are important. For people who are just trying to play videos, the flags are not important. So, but the strikes are. So, but again, upload it. It's part of the upload process now, and it'll just tell you what's going on with that video. Next question.
And our first question from Douglas Carmichael for the day. In the beginning of the Office Hours 2.0 test stream, there were full frame color bars, but not SMPTE standard color bars. Wouldn't you want to use SMPTE standard bars and 1 kilohertz tone? And what device in the system was generating those bars?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
I think it was an ATEM that also is the root cause because of why it is. I just looked at the color bars in my video assist, and it does look pretty cool to look at the vector graph of them. SMPTE doesn't look as cool. They look pretty cool, and why not? There is no reason to not use it if you are not in a regulated state. We don't want to blast people with a 1 kilohertz tone.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, what Jonas just said, the 1 kilohertz tone is there to line up audio machines or machines that are recording, so that's not necessary.
We sometimes use it in streams to know what the final output is. So are we matching up the volume against so if we're running tone through a system and it goes through the encoder. So one of the things we've discovered, for instance, is that depending on how you map your channels in an elemental, it could be plus or minus either 3 or 6 dB. So those are the kind of things that we might correct for. And we oftentimes will do that final correction of volume for whatever reason, sometimes with the encoding, whether it's being encoded as stereo or two individual tracks makes a difference in how it manages that. And so we will use that tone just to make sure that the output of our YouTube is identical to the output of our mixer, right where it's embedded. That way, when we look at we look at stuff when we're working, we know that it's the same as what's going out. Next question.
Next question is from Chris Widener from Lafayette. Is it Indiana?
Yep, Lafayette, Indiana.
Excellent. Thank you. Teaching the Australian.
Yeah.
What's the panel's opinion on the new Twitter live video changes?
Are there new ones or ones over the last couple months? Mostly what I've seen is them depreciating everything. They're getting out of Dodge is what I've mostly seen. I haven't seen anything new that's live except for what you used to be able to do is use Periscope to stream live to Twitter. And then they took that away in March. And then now you can do it through your media. You have to get approved in a media hub to do that. I don't know of any. If someone has an answer, I don't know of anything newer than those things, unless they just added something literally last week, because I've been dealing with Twitter and its inability to stream properly over the last week. So it's I would say that streaming on Twitter was a total failure. like it was total. Like it's they keep on trying and they spend a lot of money on Periscope. The underlying technology is insufficient, and the way that it worked just didn't work. And so I don't know how they're gonna. Maybe they'll turn it around, but it's kind of a mess. Next question
is from Dennis Champion Walker from Southend-on-Sea in the UK. He says, how would you make Zoom OSC the default app to launch Zoom links on Mac OS?
Go ahead, Grant.
So, I mean, I don't know if Andy's in a position to answer, but my understanding is that it's browser-based, and so you can't seem to do it with Chrome. I don't think you can do it with Safari, but I have seen that in Firefox, you can choose the default app that will launch those, which Zoom app will work in. So I haven't messed around with that lately, but that seems to be the way you can do it in Firefox.
So theoretically, if you set Firefox as your default browser and then set Zoom as the or Zoom OSC as the default for Firefox, you'd click on a link and it would take you to Zoom OSC.
Right.
Then you'd have to have Firefox as your browser. Anyways, next question.
Is from Rupert McCrae, in Dallas, Texas. Zoom published an article about an outdoor Zoom room. The hardware used was Shure MX-A710W 2FT microphones and a P300 interface and a QSC SPA2 60 amp, JBL 67 PT speakers, a Sunbright 4K 75-inch display, and a Huddle IQ camera. Thoughts on these choices?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. The article was for Bridgewater and Associates, which is a major hedge fund. And I think it's pretty slick. I mean, meeting people where they are, getting out of the office and being able to hear people intelligibly. So it's a microphone that's $2,300. If you look online, I'll put a link in the chat. You can listen in a typical conference room of distances of up to 11 feet. It will cause some Zoom fatigue at that. It's also got a processor that's doing some DSP. So a lot of this is the audio. And, I wish that everybody can just get their own headset mic and be able to walk around. But for an outdoor environment like this, where they're just walking up, talking, with the Huddly, they're able to do 2 or 3 people. And with the new software in Zoom Rooms, you can actually have it break out distinct people. It's intelligent enough that it'll actually create 3 different Zoom boxes if 3 people are present. So it's a really slick system. I hope to see more of this type of thing as it just becomes the norm. But that is an investment. I mean, all in all, you're talking like what, $5,000-$6,000 in equipment. But if that's how you could connect people from remote to remote to remote, it's a heavy investment, especially in offices and non-offices like that for a major firm. So I love to see more of that.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to add the interesting thing about Zoom Rooms. They added an update recently where you can add a second video stream, so another camera.
I think
when
up
you
to
have
3.
2 cameras.
I think you get up to 3.
Yeah. Well, okay. I was only looking at it today and it was maximum of 2, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's another setting there. But
it's 2 plus the main, Grant. So you can add 2 additional to the main. So when you look at the settings, it'll say add 2 cameras, but then you still have the main camera.
Yeah, so it's a pretty cool feature to be able to add extra views for people in Zoom Rooms.
Do we know if we're able to control those each camera, like request control, like we do with other ones?
Yeah, it comes up as another user, as another participant with sort of a.
So you theoretically could pan. Yeah, it seems like a really cool feature.
Hmm.
Go ahead, Chris.
It's an interesting idea to have something that people can just walk up to, like a Zoom kiosk or something. And as a lot of producers who are trying to do hybrid events where they're linking remote people with an actual event, it might be a cool idea to have like various Zoom kiosks around the event where people could walk up and interact with people that actually aren't there. Just an interesting idea I had.
Yeah, there's a thing called shared spaces. I think is they have these containers that they put in all over the world, and you can kind of just walk in and start talking to people in other parts of the world. Like, I mean, they have them, and a lot of times they put them in places that would be hard to go, like Afghanistan and Iraq, but also South Korea and Rome, and you can just walk in, and they use full size projectors or screens to make that possible. And it's a pretty. I will admit that when I heard about it, I was like, that's silly. And then when I went to one, and I actually went to the one in Iraq, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. like it's I was in Erbil talking to someone, people, and they're able to just kind of connect, and you're able to sit there and talk. And when they do it full size, you're actually getting this experience like someone's just standing in front of you.
I think they're making a play for the teleportation market in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Nigel?
Yeah, I would just remind people, be careful taking your inside television outside. Your inside television is not designed to work outside. You've got 2 or 3 choices of outside television out there, and they will be different depending whether that television is in direct sunlight or in shade. but there are very specific models that are better left outside than others.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Again from Rupert, any experiences with online appointment booking services like Calendly?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I love Calendly. I was on Schedule Once at first, and then I switched over to Calendly. I've got a bunch of different types of meetings set up. No one actually sees this because I send them direct links to the particular meeting that we're doing. Some of them are free. You can also charge, if you upgrade your plan, you can actually have charged sessions. So before people click on or before they confirm their meeting, they actually have to pay a certain amount of money. So it's a really nice feature. I like it a lot.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, this is one of many calendaring systems that are out there. The basic stuff is okay, but as soon as you need to properly integrate it into your business workflow, then the pricing, obviously, then you have to start paying for them. And then to me, they're not then really that kind of cost effective. You know, you can build in booking solutions into your website more directly rather than these third-party plugins which do it. They come quite expensive when you actually want to use it for a business purpose.
Nigel?
Yeah, the other thing just to echo what Ken said before, the other thing I would tell you is if you turn one of these on, beware, it requires a level of management by you. What you can't do is set it and forget it if your calendar changes a lot. So when we do events and use that, we actually often create separate calendars specifically connected to this. Because if your day changes a lot, it's going to be a nightmare to manage.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, here's a pitfall for you. I found out the hard way. We were using a system called Simply Book Me. It worked great we were doing pre-record bookings from all over the world. And what we discovered is that they weren't handling daylight saving in any way. And so it completely destroyed our 300 bookings that we had. And we were right over the time period where there was some daylight saving changes, and it just didn't do anything. Everything was still in the old time zones. We moved to Calendly, and it's beautiful. It does what you would expect it to do, and totally handles the translation of different time zones, including daylight saving before the daylight saving change, and it maintains through.
Can you set it up so that it can accept multiple people in a given one? Like it says, up to 3 people could sign up for this window, this block.
Yeah, so you can have multiple. We have that where we have multiple people that are available at that same time, and so then it has like a round robin scenario where it'll assign another person, and we had that as a studio. We had 4 studios, and it would just assign a studio.
Right. Alan?
Yeah, and this is sort of moves into the sort of the business management system side of things. If you want to do it properly, my wife uses a system called Flowloo, which is sort of a business management CRM system where everything is tied together. And for her, appointment booking is all done. So all her calendars, everything are linked through that. It will link off. These things will link off to every imaginable service you can think of. You use Google Calendar for things, but it pulls in, and it's one control system that sort of runs everything. I mean, this one's she's been using now for a few months. She's been using the software for years, and it runs her business. It runs everything. So it's worth looking. If you do have a CRM or business management system already, see if they have modules that will tie in, because if it ties into the rest of your business, you're not going to have these things where all the expenses and everything are done for it as well, and billing and absolutely everything.
Next question.
Next question is also from Rupert. He's asking, is it true that the 12-inch iPad Pro M1 can display a gallery view of 48 participants in Zoom, while the 11-inch M1 iPad Pro can only display 12 participants?
Good, Grant.
I actually don't have an answer for you, only that I do have a 12-inch iPad Pro M1, and I've never seen more than 12 on it. So I can do some more testing for you, but I haven't seen.
I definitely haven't seen more than 12 on mine either. So I have the newest M1 12.9 or whatever, and I haven't seen that behavior. Next question.
Next question is from Alex Lindsay, who's asking, what do people think of the new Nikon announcement?
Go ahead, Alex.
I just looked at the link that you put up in the question. It's strange. There seems to be some kind of mystery in terms of ProRes RAW, because they're saying in the review, and also rumors say that it will record ProRes RAW internally, which we haven't really had on too many cameras in the last couple of years. The 8K is interesting for me when it comes to the fact that it records at 8K. I imagine putting an adapter on the front of that and getting 180 video or stereo 180 video is quite interesting from that point of view. So it's interesting from a spec point of view, not necessarily, I haven't really looked into the details of what kind of camera it is. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, it's I'm afraid to say, being a very loyal Canon shooter, it's like Nikon are quite late now to the game. Canon and then Sony have well overtaken them. The specs read okay, but for that price, you can get a 12K Blackmagic if you're shooting film. So yeah, it's about a year or two too late that they've come out with something like this. It's disappointing being a Nikon shooter. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that they some of the stuff looks pretty good. I mean, as far as 45 megapixel camera is kind of fun to think about as far as taking stills. I do agree with you though, that I think that they've had a hard time keeping up, with what's happening. I think they have to keep up. I don't know if they have to keep up 100%, because with all camera manufacturers, what holds people is the lenses. They've got $50,000 of lenses. So it's not a matter of wooing new customers as much as making sure the old customers don't feel like they've fallen so far behind that they have to switch systems. And so I think that's part of what they're in a different mode of trying to hang on to that, I think. No, I don't know. I do think that the ProRes angle is interesting. I think with the new M1, I think there's excruciating pressure on camera manufacturers to support ProRes. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, we were talking on MacBreak about it. With the dedicated chips, Richie saw a drop in his render time from 25 to 30. This is a ProRes render, from 25 to 30 minutes to 2 to 3 minutes render. Like it was so, and so with that kind of performance, I think that if you're a camera manufacturer, you have to really think about it, because you have to support you don't have to support ProRes, but it's going to get really complicated if you don't. So it'll because the performance now is outrageous. So we'll see how it goes. Next question.
It's from Chris Widener again. Is it better to stay at 720p webinar if you're playing back 720 content, or go for 1080 so the speakers are higher quality for the other 80% of the time?
Go ahead, Guy.
Say you want to know your audience and you want to be careful turning on full 1080 if you have people that may not have the right gear for it. I made the mistake of boosting my kids' school class, and they had been doing the same class every day for weeks. And then I came in with a portal and thought I was doing something good by boosting it. And the next thing I know, one of the kids is complaining, "Teacher, it says my internet is unstable." So you want that fluid experience. I mean, Zoom did what they did for a reason. They want the communication to be smooth and not bumpy. And if you can go look in your back end, and you can actually see over time, this is in the admin settings, what actually transpired. So if you know your audience well enough and you go and poke around in a few users, because you can actually see every user that attended that webinar and you can check all their stats. And so I can see what they're receiving and how it looked over time and what resolution. So you want to go and check that stuff and know your audience before boosting it up.
Mm-hmm. Grant.
Yeah, great answer, Guy. I think that specifically, if you do know that audience and you're confident that they're all got a great connection, that 1080 looks really nice. And it's something that is good about the webinars, is that you can lock that to push 1080 the whole time to the attendees. And if you know particularly your panelists are capable of doing 1080, then that's a good thing. One thing to remember, just a little tip, is that if anyone turns on virtual backgrounds, which no one should ever, but if they do, it'll always lock that to 720. It cannot do 1080 with a virtual background on.
And will it lock just their feed to 720? or will it affect everybody?
Just them. I tested that.
Yeah.
It's just
In webinar or web or meetings?
in what
So if anybody is incapable of producing 1080p in a meeting, it brings the whole meeting to 720. It took us a long time to suss that out. So a meeting, if anybody is incapable of 1080p, the whole meeting has to come to 720. So I think that virtual backgrounds really does ruin it for everybody. I think it ruins all the things. We should test that. We'll test that.
Yeah, that's where the webinar seems a little different because it must be.
No, the webinar I
it
don't
must
think
be
it's affected. I
scaling
think
up.
it's 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a we can test that in after hours anytime we want. See if we're getting 1080p and then have someone turn a virtual background on and ruin it for everybody. Not that I just need one more reason to say that, you just have to have a long list of technical reasons why you should never use virtual backgrounds. Next question.
Yeah, because ears disappearing is not enough. The next question is from Alex 4D Goldner from London, UK. And he says, why doesn't Apple promote and support Final Cut Pro and Motion as much as Apple-owned Claris promotes and supports FileMaker?
Nigel.
Yeah, a couple of quick thoughts here. I'm not sure I can answer the question for Apple, but I can answer the question as someone who's run multi-brands before. Typically, if you have a lot of different products from promotion or advertising, you tend to pick one or two to go out with. Any company communicating lots of different products, lots of different brands gets confusing. I think the second thought is that if you're a company like Apple, you're probably looking at awareness, consideration, and preference of your brand in the marketplace. My guess is Final Cut Pro doesn't have an awareness problem in the set of potential users. What it has is probably a consideration and preference issue. So they want more people who know about it to use it, and that requires different tools and techniques than simple advertising or promotion.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm talking about advertising, promotion, support, if you go to the Claris website, they have a community of database consultants that they support, and you can actually find your database consultant on the Claris website. Or you may have people from Claris and being part of forums, answering questions and talking about stuff. And they have ongoing events. So they did do an annual event for 25 years, and they've already announced in April that next year's event will probably be in July 2022. But until then, they're doing continuous online events, not even just monthly, but all the time. So this seems to be a good way of supporting both a third-party ecosystem and a consultant-based ecosystem, which is much more like what you need for pro apps like Motion and Final Cut than you may need for something like Keynote. So there's that aspect of it in terms of building up ecosystems so that people can do more good with Motion and Final Cut Pro to change their world and leave the world a better place, as Apple would put it. And then also the other side of it is I'm on the board of governors of British Film Editors, which is the UK equivalent of ACE. And yes, there isn't a consideration. There's a slight awareness much less awareness of Final Cut than there used to be even 5 years ago. It's not even talked about. And there certainly isn't a consideration aspect of it. And it's not about features. It's the fact that Apple doesn't seem to be supporting it in any kind of level, industry level, or any sort of way.
Go ahead, Sky.
I defer to Nigel as a brand. Apple is no longer, we don't go to the Mac store, we go to the Apple store. And yesterday when I went into the Apple store, it was the iPhone 13 store. The entire experience walking in for the first 80% of and we have computers somewhere in the back. So I think to Nigel's point, they're focusing very heavily on where their highest profit margin is and saturating that lower market base. Plus, wouldn't you want to, as a company, wouldn't you want to work with a whole bunch of people that are willing to do whatever you want versus a bunch of grumpy old editors?
Go ahead, Chris.
I think if you look at the numbers, Apple would probably say, we got a pretty good, plenty of people are using Final Cut. I think that the pro market is a problem market because pros tend to be, super critical and why isn't this and that. But, millions of people are using Final Cut. And I think to a certain degree, they're like, we're okay.
Alex?
That's true, but I would counter that it's weird how they don't seem to support the middle part of the market either in terms of a business video or personal video of any kind. And FileMaker Pro is a really good example of that. There's all sorts of sizes of FileMaker for all sorts of people, individual consultants or other companies supporting it, and lots of third party. And Claris, which is an Apple-owned company, runs all that. So, I mean, I kind of like the idea of Apple moving Final Cut to Claris, which would then be a pro brand.
I don't know if it's true. I don't have any inside information, but there's a rumor that Final Cut is the second largest install base for video editing in the world. You know what it sits behind?
iMovie. I'm guessing it's going to guess.
Yeah. So the number one is I'm not sure they need it as much as we think they need it. Number two is I don't know if they don't support anything. You kind of see, there's FMC stuff that goes on. There's other things like that. I'm not sure that they're not supporting things. I think that they're just not, publishing, pushing down on it. I think Apple is in a very odd situation where they make a piece of software that competes with some of their key partners. And so I think that in certain places where it's important that those key partners continue to develop, I think it makes more sense for them to tread lightly, especially if they're doing okay, with what they're doing. I think Apple's need for Final Cut and Motion have more to do with controlling their destiny when it comes to how all these apps work together. So there's a bunch of things that I think we can see from the outside are coming together. So there are a bunch of pieces that we're seeing slowly being tied together, and Apple needs to make sure that they're not waiting for Photoshop to get updated, or they're not waiting for something else. There's always a threat that Apple could just step down and start promoting something really, really heavily, and just push everything into the ground if they wanted to. That keeps the entire industry going, and they don't need to advertise to do that. That what they need is it to exist. To it exist. So Logic existing is coaxing people forward. Logic adding spatial coaxes everybody forward. Like now, you have to compete with something that's $300 for one time, purchase. What I will tell you, as someone who works in social media, a lot of social media influencers, I almost never see anything other than Final Cut. Like once they move up from the base app, the only people I see using something other than Final Cut for social media are people who see themselves as someday they'll work in Hollywood. Like someday they'll work somewhere else. So I have to learn Premiere, or I have to learn Avid, or I have to learn something else. But if they're just making it for themselves and time is money, like they don't have a lot of money, it's their own business. What we see over and over again is the influencers using Final Cut, because they just have to turn it around quickly. And so that's been our experience. And Apple has overtly supported things like Vlog University, Justine Ezerick's Vlog University, and so on and so forth, taking people who are already excited about the product and just giving them the resources they need to do something with it. So I don't know if they're as as hands-off as it may appear from the surface. You're also seeing iPhones now shooting ProRes. You see Final Cut Final Cut and Motion adding 3D. You see AR coming in. You see more video and media resources happening in Pages and Keynote and Numbers. And eventually you're going to see, a lot more of that. So you're seeing all these apps slowly coming together to be able to seamlessly send content back and forth between all of them. Apple can't depend on somebody else to do that for them. They have to have the tools to build that. They don't have to have those tools be insanely popular or high revenue to make that successful. But just because they don't talk about it very much, I don't think necessarily means that it's an unsuccessful product. So, but that's my view from the outside. Next question.
It's from Rupert McRae, who says, what is the best way to mic up an upright piano and the piano player if all you have available is SM58s for either live teaching or pre-recorded content?
Good, Grant.
So the interesting thing with the uprights, it always depends, and testing on that particular one is the key. I've had success in putting a 58 right in the back of it, so pointing right at the back. One of the things is that particularly in a stage environment, if there's other noise around in that environment, then that gets it really close to the source. But the other thing is too that lots of those uprights pull apart. You can pull the front panel off, and you can often pull the bottom panel off as well, and it will reveal the strings. And now you can get a really bright sound even on a 58. And so you could actually tuck those underneath the keys tucked in right underneath. You could get a really good sound under there, and then another 58 on a stand for the player. It depends how many you've got, but the more you have, you could get a really good sound, and you could mix that in with the back as well.
Good guy.
Yeah, kind of last minute. Here's Triad Orbit's site. This is the exact system that I'm using right now to hold my mic up. And this looks dangerous, but trust me, their stuff is really, really, really good. And if you flip through their Instagram, it's Triad_Orbit_official. You can see more pictures like this to get some ideas. But this is how the big guys are doing it.
Triad Orbit. Just go to the website, check it out. It is one of the coolest websites. I have some of their tripods, so these are really heavy, low open tripods that we use for 360, but then I start using it for everything, and the build quality is incredible. Next question
is from Douglas Carmichael. When recording a drum machine like a Roland TR-8S via analog outputs, would a stereo pair be sufficient, or would it be best to separate the kick, drum, and snare?
Go ahead, Grant.
So I think giving options, the more options in post is always better. And so depending on what your interface is to interface with those analog outputs, I would use up all of your inputs into your interface and get as many of those individual sounds that are coming off of that drum machine into the recording program. So then you can tweak each individual sound, and you can mix it, and you can pan them, and you can do all of that. If you're really only limited to stereo, then those machines have a little mixer on them, and you'd need to try to do as best you can while going in live.
I almost have it all built in I'll show it to you when we're done, but I have a 514, individual speakers system with all the synths going into the mixer as well as separate feeds, so that I can start, panning all the stuff everywhere. So it's probably a couple weeks away now that I have a little more time. So anyway, I'll keep you guys up to date as we get it. I got to tear the whole system. I got to tear my whole room apart to put it together. So all the things are sitting in piles right now to put them together. But because I'm going to take all this off and put that maker rail up that someone here suggested, and I decided it was cheaper than speed rail. so I'm rebuilding the whole kit. Next question.
Comes from Chris Fennick, who says, end of year purchases. I may be buying a large, local and fast RAID. Any thoughts and suggestions to consider?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Chris, I'm with you. I'm thinking about the same thing, but I think part of the matrix of decision making is dependent upon how do I intend to use it? Am I using it for acquisition and workflow into an edit? Or is it simply a bit bucket that's there for high-speed editing, things like that? So depending on the prior, you need some kind of a system that works for you. And I would consider everything from what do I have? Oh, wow. Anyhow.
What kind of, Doug, what kind of speeds are you getting on those 45 drives? I just threw Doug. Doug didn't see that coming, did he? That's what happens when your camera's on. I just threw the ball. I threw the ball.
Yeah. I tried. I get really, I edit off that machine. It's got 10 gig NIC cards in it, or a NIC card in it. Yeah. I edit directly on it, and it's built for multiple people to edit. So it's extremely fast, and I won't buy anything else.
I'm at the G drive. Sorry, I had a brain infarction there. And I guess the question is SSD versus multi hard drives.
Well, Chris, you already have a NVMe based drive, right?
Yeah, I do. It's 4 terabytes. It's okay. I would like something more in like the 20 or 36 terabyte. And I am thinking, when I say local, I want it to be Thunderbolt 3 or 4. I want it to be probably SSD. I want as fast as I can possibly cram into the back of a Macintosh. Like I like to call it right-hand column every option on the way down.
No,
Buy that
right.
one.
Right. I mean, the numbers on on that laptop are amazing too. Like I was tempted. I don't usually put big hard drives into the laptops. And I haven't bought the laptop, but I think 8 gigs, and I think that wasn't it like 3,000.
I think the number you're looking for is 8 terabytes.
8 terabytes in a laptop.
An 8 gig hard drive in a laptop. Wow.
I meant terabytes. Yeah.
What
8
year
gigs.
is this?
8 gigs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I have considered just getting another one of those OWC 4M, whatever it's called, and putting just bigger chips in it,
Yeah,
like,
I
cause
think you can get it up to 16. I think you can get four terabyte each.
Yeah. That might be what I do.
Yeah.
I recently worked on a very large 6K project on that drive. Yeah. Let's talk about that one. I want to hear what Guy has to say. He just held up something super dope.
Go ahead, Guy.
Well, this company just got bought, but we've heard about them for years. G-Tech. So
who bought them?
SanDisk or Western Digital bought them. So the big boy is this one now. It's the G-Rate shuttle that I just held up. 144 terabyte, 10 grand. You need a tax write-off. There you go, Chris.
What's the no? That's what I'm shopping for.
Do you know what the speed is?
Are those spinners or is that
Spinners,
just rusty spinners?
They're not rusty. They're fast.
It will be one day.
One day. Well, you'll be. That's a lot. Another story.
Do we know what its throughput is? Do we know what its throughput is?
It depends on how you format it. In RAID 6, I believe we're getting about 1,000. I haven't speed tested this one recently, but 1900 to 2,000 megabytes read and write speeds in. It says 0, 1, 5, 6, 10, and 50, but I'm in 6, and I think I was only getting like 1,200, I want to say, in 6.
I want a lot faster than that. I want to be up in the 2,500, 3,000 range.
I think it's so funny. I built a RAID from scratch, just straight to the metal, so that I could get. I had to get 250 megs a second. Like it was high performance. It cost me a lot of money to just.
What
and
year was that?
It was 2005. Yeah, so it was what we bought these. That's when we bought the 1080p, the Star Wars cameras, the 950s, and they were about 225 megs a second, for uncompressed 444, and I had to build a RAID because there was nothing to capture. I couldn't afford an SR deck. And there's no tape deck.
I just heard something I've never heard before. Did you have multiple 950s?
For only a day.
Okay.
So yeah. So we had them. So there were two 950s that were available.
Bought two and offed one.
Yeah, it was the only way I could afford it. They were $82,000 each used. So they were. It came with a CCU though and a lens. The lens is actually really good. The way ILM would buy lenses is to make sure they all matched. I think they had Fujinon bring like 30 or 40 lenses. And then they just looked at them all and then sent a bunch of them back. Like, these are the ones we want, So anyway, so they were matching lenses. So those two cameras were cool. But yeah, a friend of mine bought the other one. Yeah, I had to take out all kinds of loans and make deals and turn it upside down. He wrote a check. so anyway,
well, I've heard you talk about the Star Wars camera for years, but that was the first time I heard it plural. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it would be great to have two of them. But anyway, next question.
That was one of the cameras you had to put your head under a sheet behind it to use it. It was one of those old cameras.
Yeah, exactly. It still shoots. I still have it. It still shoots really good footage at 1080 because it's CCD. It's not CMOS. So it's actually it's still a pretty high quality camera. 15 years later, and technically 20 years later, because it was when I bought it. It was already 5 years old. Next question.
Cool. Is from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Fever is the ticketing service behind the Van Gogh exhibit. Has anyone else used Fever, and what do you think?
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, I had the opportunity of visiting that experience yesterday, the one installation that's here in Seattle, and I'm very interested because they said they have 8 other installations across the United States. So I'm interested in other people seeing that exhibit because it's fantastic in inspiration. But B, as I'm trying to understand these ticketing services and systems, if other people are using Fiverr, because it was a
Fever.
way of getting
Is it fever
ticket.
or fiber?
Fever. No, you're right. Fever. You're right. Thank
Right.
you. Fever.
This is not really answering your question, but because no one else has raised their hand. The thing that I think is going to be interesting about location events is a merge of a virtual experience that doesn't take you to the location, but draws you to the location. So you can learn about the location. So let's say I'm going to a castle, or something like that. What if I could pull that castle up on my desktop, on my tabletop, look at it and have little things and little videos and learn all about it while I'm sitting in the lounge on the way to the airport or at the airport or whatever, but I could be learning all about it with virtual, content. Then when I get there, I have heads up displays. I can point at something at the wall and it'll tell me what happened there. And there'll be or I can, put my I could have glasses, or I could put something up and I could see what it used to look like when it was at its peak with people walking around and everything else. But that I think you could get to a point where you bought into it early before you've ever showed up, and it would enrich your experience when you actually show up, if you ever show up. But they generate revenue from it, whether you show up or not.
Well, they did at the end of it. You would walk in and it felt like a museum experience.
Right.
And there was a lot of great experiences of what the different history of Van Gogh was. And then you went into this huge projection room, and they say it's 44,000 square feet of experience. But at the end, it was an upsell if you wanted to put a VR headset on and do a walkthrough of yet a third concept.
Right.
So it's a multi-experience thing.
I'm always surprised that museums and locations haven't taken more advantage of just, and some of it has to do also with ultra wideband, because ultra wideband allows you to track the phone to a very, very small ball, so very, very a ball about this big. It knows where you're at, and then you can get a lot of information that you can hand back to someone, because I know what you're looking at. I know what you're doing. Anyway, go ahead, John.
Sky, the only cure for a fever is more cowbell.
All right. Next question.
Next question's from Douglas Carmichael. A friend of mine wants to produce remote therapy sessions with her horse in a horse pasture. Would a DJI OM5 gimbal give a stabilized picture when used without a separate operator?
I think it would depend on the horse. The problem you're going to have is that you'll still have a vertical movement, which will make people a little seasick. So the problem with I'm not sure which one the OM5 is. The very new DJI. Yeah, the OM5 I don't think has a vertical translation, so you're still going to see a bounce if you're on the horse. So that's going to be something that is problematic for folks. The newest one, which is a lot more expensive and bigger, solves that problem. So it actually has a vertical stabilizer in it. So that's the new Ronin 4 is there, and I'm dying to test it. It is one step closer to a Steadicam. It's not a Steadicam. So I have to say that every single time because my brother's a Steadicam operator. But not a Steadicam. There's things that my brother does that's super complex, and I've watched him do it, and I could never do that with a gimbal. But for many of the shots that we use gimbals for, the Ronin 4 is one of the most amazing things that I've seen, at least on paper. And some of the shots are just amazing. So that might be more down that path. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm only showing when she says he or she says a separate operator. I suddenly just thought of the iPad Pro with its 4K camera and auto panning, and I just don't know if it also pans to horses as well as people in terms of it just being locked off and just panning around whatever happens in front of it.
Yeah. Next question
is from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. When plugging in a Blackmagic studio camera with SDI out and a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera with HDMI out into an ATEM Extreme, will there be noticeable sync issues between the two types of cameras? And if so, how would you correct for a live show?
The most likely there'll be a frame off. I think that it's going to the SDI to HDMI conversion will probably cost you a frame. And I don't know that for sure. We'd have to test it against what we have, but I believe it'll cost you a frame. And what you do is you sync the audio to the slower signal. So always sync to the slowest signal. And the reason for that is that human beings actually are not bothered nearly as much by the video being in front of the audio, because we naturally see that. When lightning goes off and then you see it and you hear it, that's a long distance. That's an exaggerated version. But if you're at a baseball game and you're 1,000 feet away, there's a second between when the person hits the ball and when you hear it. And so your brain is solving that problem all the time naturally. So by a frame or two, it's used to it, because light gets to you immediately and sound doesn't. so you always want to correct for the one that's going to be the earliest one, because it won't bother us. What bothers us is when the audio comes before the video, because in nature that never happens, unless you're sick. so unless you've eaten the wrong berries, the audio will never come to you before the video. So next question.
Comes from Daniel McFarlane in Belfast, UK. Any reason as to why the Blackmagic ATEM Television Studio HD uses a PL68 input jack for microphone input? Is there a benefit over a standard 1/4-inch jack?
Go ahead, Guy.
No benefit. They made a mistake. I mean, it was straight up a mistake, because we had to stock these aviation headsets for a while there to deal with it. So these are the kind of headsets that pilots wear. And now they've corrected it. And in the new Constellation, you'll see that there's a 5-pin XLR connector in the front. And then they've got additional connectivity with a rear RJ12 talkback, so you can tie into Clearcom and RTS. But yeah, they straight up made a mistake. Putting that on there was just nah.
Yeah, I think that the thought process and I think that Blackmagic is slowly moving out of this thought process of how do we allow the user to save a little bit of money. These are the aviation headsets are a little bit less expensive or there's a wide range of them that are a little less expensive than the comms headsets. And I think that my guess is that they wanted to make it more accessible. Oh, you could buy them, but the problem is it just made them really hard to deal with. So yeah, I think I agree with you, Guy. And what I will say is that their comm system in general, even within the switcher, to me is just a complete disaster. Like I love Blackmagic. I have a lot of their hardware. The way that we can almost never get it to work across all the cameras, especially through the fiberbacks. Like the transport doesn't work. We can't figure out why. We're following all the instructions. We're talking to people in tech support. We're trying to figure it all out. And it's been hours and hours and hours until we were finally like, we're just going to use Unity, or Clearcom or something, or the Dante or something. But we don't use the internal comms on Blackmagic from the Constellation ever, because it works one day and then not the next. It doesn't work when you add another camera. It doesn't, it's completely unstable. So just saying, don't be careful when you go down that path. Next question.
Comes from Robert Draper in Point Richmond. Is there an affordable wired microphone, hopefully under $100, for a Blue Yeti mic M1 Mac Mini combo?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I read this question as if he's looking for a microphone, and the Rode NT USB is $99, and the one Mr. Preto talked about before is also $99. The Audio Technica ATR 2100 that has both the XLR and the USB on it.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, we've said this many times in the past, but sometimes the best $100 microphone is the one that you buy after you've saved a few more $100. And a lot of times that number, I get it. I don't want to make light of budgets and things like that, but sometimes the best thing to do is to wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Comes from Chris Fenwick. What is the likelihood or possibility of Apple licensing a product called Camera OS to other camera manufacturers to allow others to take advantage of their technology?
Zero.
Really?
I don't think they care about SLRs or anything else. I think that they're really focused on making. I think the rumor now is it's like 800 engineers working on that camera on the phone. Yeah, so I think all they're interested in. Especially now that they just dropped the ProRes bomb. You could shoot. They're not there yet. I think that I started playing with the little, the cinematic thing, and it's cute. it's not. It's still. I still see the edges. Like in what they're doing, and so that's the part that bothers me. But I even saw it in their keynote. You could see the edges, going across that, and so
you have a pretty critical eye, but
no. So for YouTube stuff and for kids little movies and stuff like that, I think it'll be great. But I think that I was a massive proponent of I just want a better sensor on my iPhone. And Sony made one and it didn't really go anywhere. And I have a bunch of the DxO ones that you could just you could attach the camera to and it still shoots better images than most of the phones. I think that iPhone 12 or 13 kind of starts to shoot better, but it's shooting 20 megapixel out of the DxO. But I think that.
Do you think that there's the potential of a future where Apple gets out of the phone in your pocket business camera in your pocket business and makes a cinema camera?
I think the cinema camera is too small for Apple. Like I just can't. I don't think they can think in that in those numbers.
Too small a market, you mean?
Too small a market, for them. Like it's. So I don't think that the cinema business is too small. Like I think if they can't sell 100 million of something, I don't think that they're that interested. I'm not kidding. Like I think it's maybe as few as 10 or 20 million, but that's really like a minimum. It's just not. It's not that they couldn't do it, and not that they couldn't do it profitably. It's just that the hard part with all these companies is, and we come back to it, it's technical resources. Like the people to do this is a very, very limited resource. Like it's not like people say, people think, well, there's all these people unemployed. Yeah, but those people can't do what these people are doing. It's not, and people think that you can just go out on trees and find more engineers. And if you're a good engineer, I mean, I have friends that, that work at some of these companies that they just get incredible amounts of stock that are being thrown at them with 4-year vesting, and everything else, because they're just desperate to hang on to them because they know that there's nobody else like them in the world, and really like nobody else, and I think that all these companies we always joke that there's probably, between 10 and 20 people in any given company that if you pulled them all out at one time, the company would fail. like you can think millions of people, but there's we call them linchpins, and in different companies I've met them, and I'm like, I know who the linchpins are here, and you just pull the linchpins out, and the whole company would just devolve into nothing, because they're just they're very because they're making decisions, and they're making the right decisions at the right time, at the right and they're doing it in the right way, and it's just really, really complicated. So I think that what Apple has done, and the reason that they do it better than everyone else, is they don't get distracted. They keep those scarce resources focused on a very few number of things that maximize their potential, and I think that that's I think that, and when they sometimes pull resources away from other other things, because there's only so many of those people, in any given company, and they're really hard to find, and they're really hard to keep, and they're really, it's a process. Go ahead, Alex.
I suppose you could look at, I like the idea of an OS being licensed to camera makers, so that they say you get all ProRes and our color science through this, but that's really not because Apple want them to use ProRes. It's more that Apple want to popularize depth, and they actually want these camera companies to do proper depth, and to eventually, so we all get to point clouds, because depth is just a step to point clouds. And in 2018, they were talking about the sensor for depth only having a resolution of 360 by 240. It's only a little bit more now. So I think there's a possibility with depth. Another way of looking at it is that Apple are trying to do something kind of similar with CarPlay. Can't there be camera play, in which you've kind of got your phone controlling a big, Arri or Panaflex or whatever we want to call it, and you kind of get the combination of Apple skills and also the hardware company skills in some sort of way. So it will be kind of camera play.
I think so, but I think that the software is there to control those cameras now. I mean, I regularly control my Blackmagic camera from a third-party app, that runs it, and so I think that those are. A lot of those tools can be built. I think CarPlay is really useful for Apple as it relates to, if you were building a car, it'd be really great to have all that data. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, how many, apart from CarPlay, I can't think of anything that Apple create for other people to put on other people's hardware. I mean, iOS, macOS, all of those are.
ProRes is the best example, I think. I mean, who would have ever thought?
That's not an operating system, though.
No, but it's pretty important.
Yeah. Well, and HLS.
And I think
mean,
the other,
like
the
HLS
other,
runs the world, but so that's the other one. Like HLS is like what you see on YouTube, and every live stream that you see and everything else is all HLS or Dash, and Dash is just kind of a more modern version of HLS. So next question.
It's from Rupert McRae asking, Amazon is running TV ads for flexible hiring. In a press release, they also say there will be teams that continue working mostly remotely, and that working remotely can be inspiring and energizing. What other big names are going for this image?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes, I would point out that some of this is advertising and is not always really what's happening. And if you work in an Amazon warehouse, then you're not working remotely. I think this is going to separate into three groups. The linchpins, as Alex just called them, are going to want to work wherever they want, however they want, because there aren't that many of them. I think there are going to be some hybrid workers. And then I think you'll find, as much as this may seem strange, there are a lot of empty buildings that even Google and other people are going to bring their people back to, because it's not about remote working, it's about management of remote workers.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this is going, because people have gotten used to remote working, or at least working from home, and now I've even seen news articles of companies that are paying more for people to come into the office on certain days and things like this. So that because people are totally like, it worked so much better working from home. I used to say when I worked on site, in a big office, the amount of wasted time with people just coming and interrupting you, or all of those birthday, the birthday dinners and all these interruptions that you would have. It's like, everyone has to come for this morning tea or whatever it is, and so there's so much wasted time, and I think it works so much better remotely. And then hanging out like we do in after hours is that kind of co-working space that you can totally control, and it's been awesome doing that.
When I grew up, we raised horses, quarter horses, and so we made electric fences. And electric fences, they're horrible. They're horrible to put together because my dad was cheap, so we didn't get the good electric fences. We got these little fiberglass poles that you punch in, and then you have to run the things down, so your fingers end up filling up with fiberglass, and your little stingies for the next week as you put them together. But we put these little things together, these poles, and then we put flags on them to make sure that the horses know that there's something there. And the horses run up against it, they get shocked, and then they learn that those flags mean that you can't go past this area, and they stop messing with it. And it got to a point where I could take the fence, part of the fence, down at a time and not even have it working, and the horses would all stay in the pasture. They just stay in that half of the pasture because you don't go past the flags. The problem we had is we got this new horse. We got this new barrel racer that was my barrel racer, and he was all trouble. And he would lean up against the fence, get shocked, but as soon as the fence grounded, he just went through it. And when he went through it, all the horses got outside of that little half of the pasture that they were allowed to have, and they really liked it. They were like, this is awesome that I can be out here. I can be in the pond, and I can be around the pond, and I can be out in the woods. And that was, with 10 of them, it's a thing, and so it was never the same, because once he ran through them, no matter what we did, they just ran through it again, because they were like, it's so much better over here than it was in the pasture. And I think that the thing is that for a long time, we've been in this situation where everyone was in that little pasture in there, and there wasn't a lot of grass, and there wasn't a lot of stuff, and they're stuck in this pasture. Once they got out, they don't want that grass anymore. They want the good grass that's over here, and I think that, I'm sure Chris was wondering, what is he talking
where
about?
are you going with this horse story? I know it has something, but I can't figure. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So everyone's been in this pasture. They got out of college. They got the job that they got. They had their little life in there, and there was this is just the way corporate life is. And you sit in this stupid little cubicle, or worse than the cubicle is the open office, which is just a disaster. I mean, I would, working for these corporate companies, as someone who doesn't, work there all the time as a consultant, I was a red badge and a gray badge and a yellow badge and an orange badge at some point. I would just sit there going, this is insane. Like, like this would make me absolutely crazy to do this full time. I could not. I was, and everyone was just kind of, oh yeah. Every time I get a phone call, I have to stand up and walk out. And every time, and I have headphones on, so that I try to do, and I try to have little signs, and I try to do all this little thing. And suddenly they had a whole year of not having that. That's getting out of that pasture, and I just don't think that. And the other thing is our life is like a gel. Like my life is so full now. Like going to my office, which is 20 minutes away, I'm like, just to drop something off, I'm like, I don't know where to put that in the day. Like, I don't know where, like, there's so many things going on in my day that I don't know where to, sometimes it takes me a week to get down there to see poor Kevin who needs me to drop something off because I can't figure out where to put it because from 5 a.m. in the morning until, 8 o'clock at night, I've got all kinds of things that have to be done, and so I think that it's going to be really hard to put that cat back in the bag, or the horse back in the pasture. So it'll be something to see how this all works out. Next question.
Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another farming analogy.
Hey, I can give you farming analogies all day. I try to hold them back every once in a while, but I look at everything through farming, like it's, so anyway. Go ahead.
It was good.
Did it work? Did it work as a good, was it a good analogy?
It worked.
It was a very, and now for the rest of the story, because I had you, like,
a while.
You were sitting there. Yeah.
It took a while, but it worked.
Was it a good payoff? Good payoff? Okay. We got to finish these questions, and then we'll get to Office Hours 2.0. Go ahead. Next question.
Most questioner today was from another one from Rupert. Any recent anecdotes coming from Infocom?
Did anyone go? I think we have to wait for next week until Jeffrey gets back. I think Jeffrey's the only one that I know of that went. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot to hit the button. So Jeffrey was in After Hours yesterday, and there was a couple of interesting things. He said that he had some talk that he did. I don't know what it was about. He said it was larger than normal attendance at one of his talks, which was interesting because the footage he was showing us looked really. It was a thin crowd, but he also said that a few people, total lurkers, came up and said, "Oh, I know you from After Hours." So be prepared as you go out into the real world. You may be rock stars now. I'm just gonna say.
I've heard that from a couple of our members recently, of just like, that people walk up to him in productions and just go, "I know you from Office Hours." Like just random people. So, and that will probably get more intense. Next question.
Last question for the first hour is from Jesse Mills in San Francisco. Is there a way to create a button push on Companion to record to a local drive with Zoom?
Go ahead, Grant.
So what I do with my Zoom shortcuts is I turn on the global settings. So when you see shortcuts in the Zoom settings, you can make global so that it doesn't matter what your active window is. And the way that I do it is I still use the Stream Deck local, the Stream Deck native software. And then I do Companion buttons. So you can use Companion as a plugin into Stream Deck. And so that means that I can do a combination of using native Stream Deck buttons as well as Companion buttons. And so I do it. And so all of that to say that the mute button that I use is just on the Mac, it's Shift Command M, I think. And the local record is Shift Command R. And so you can set that up all in Stream Deck. I think you can do keyboard shortcuts in Companion as well. I just know that it works really well with the Stream Deck software.
There you go. All right. Now we are going to shift gears and jump into our many questions for Office Hours 2.0. Sometimes we have one or two. We get to the top of the hour, and I'm like, I hope we can get to the bottom of the hour. Not the problem here that we have here. So we're not going to mince any words. If you're watching, if you're watching here, you can. The thing to know is that we're streaming a separate 4K stream out of an edit system, which Andy can answer. Andy and Jonathan are in our offices. There they are, and they're going to be able to answer any questions that come up for them. And we're just getting started. So the thing is that this is almost, yesterday was really Hello World. So we just had a couple little things working there, and now we're kind of going to slowly creep forward. as we do this, and so we're going to keep on working with all of you in figuring out, what should we do, and a lot of things won't work for a while, but we hope to the goal is to get to a point where it looks like a broadcast by the end of the year. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the Office Hours 2.0 questions.
Okay, first one is from. Sorry, we got the wrong one there.
Yeah,
TJ Asher. We're going to do Dennis. Sorry.
Sorry. No, you're right. Hold on. Let me cancel that and start that one. I got the wrong one. So we have the last question here. Sorry.
Seamless.
Oh, no, this is it. I just hit the wrong one. Sorry.
Seamless.
Operator error. All right, go ahead.
Good. TJ Asher. Does it make sense to have a single individual in a super source when they are the only person answering a question?
Go ahead, John.
So we're only in day 2, and of course this is going to be refined. Yesterday when I watched, and Alex and I talked about this earlier on After Hours today, when the people that raise their hands are all in the super source and the first guy is done with this question, he's still on the super source screen, then we thought then it could be like a little McLaughlin group if you had all the people that were discussing the answers to that question that could communicate back and forth between each other. But then today I saw David Paskin's screen where he did his whole little screen share that looked fantastic, and the guys highlighted that all together that looked really good. So I think it's work in progress. It's looking good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
I thought it was interesting that we had the people who were going to answer the question, who were already up, they had to realize they were going to be in a super source, and they were there after they answered their question. I think maybe it would be to what extent we also want to have comebacks, because obviously I want to sometimes do a little bit of interaction with somebody. It's a kind of comeback mode in which we optionally want to be there in case we want to. So this is more direction style. This is not for now. It's just a bit of feedback from yesterday.
Well, and we have it set up so that that super source is dynamic. So if we add somebody to the tail end of it, it'll move everybody over and add another person to the super source. So it'll actually animate another person in. So if during the question I'm adding people, it'll literally add them to the bit. So if you want to come back in and talk, you can by raising your hand again.
Yeah, we need to have a way of making sure that Alex Golner doesn't show up twice. I know that you guys had that happen once because he was pinned twice.
Yeah, that's a function of because we let you raise your hand twice. I think we have to have some stuff in there to look at it and say, oh, there's 2 of them. Let's not do that.
And also, one other aspect of this, I think it might be interesting that if the person who asked the question is actually in the panel, to actually include them in the super source when they are the person who is answering, because it was quite interesting watching people who actually asked the question nodding along and reacting to what people were saying. And I really like that because then you have the option to that person to then interact a little bit. So that's one of and obviously who cares about making the people on the panel happy, but I kind of like the idea of that little option of the emotional reaction to somebody answering your question and the next person coming up and then providing more information or asking more of a question of the person who asked the question.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that makes sense. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think initially when we were talking about super sources that they would not animate in, that they would just appear in, and we would use some device to wipe it. But the challenge here is that think about what's going to be going on. I mean, it's going to be a constant shuffling of super sources, and if we use any type of bumper or sweeper to wipe between them, it's going to get rather pedantic after a while. All this stuff.
I agree. I think we're past that, though. I think the reason that I was looking at it being not animated was because I wanted to make these really great mortises and do some stuff that's really creative. But I'm realizing how interesting it is to have people coming on and off based on who's asking the question and who's done with the question and who's, we're talking about the idea of having the screen pop up, the question asker. So Grant in this show. Pop up and ask the question, and then when they're done, they hit a button that says "I'm done asking the question," and then they zip off. So they can look down. So they're just there for the next question, and the folks are there. And I don't know. I mean, one of the other things I've been thinking about is how often we need to go to the gallery, because one of the things I was thinking is when you hit answer, you could just go to the super source. Like here's the super source. The person's asking the question, then they get out of the way, and then the people who are going to answer it are already there.
If you were going to add an element to transition into the next question, That might make sense
Yeah.
because it's a segment change and it's a change of venue. Intersituational.
I think the sweepers make sense in the changing the question, one question to the next. I think a sweeper could make sense, and it'd be about.
Well, it's also kind of Pavlovian because you're training your audience that when this bell goes off, a thing will happen. So consistency.
Yeah. Absolutely, Chris.
Alex, in the back end of Mukana, do you have ability to reorder the chiclets so that you can sort of shape how you want the build to go, and then does that get to Andy, that order?
So yeah, the order in which I select you. So I can't move them around, but the order you'll notice that some days I just go 1, 2, 3, like how the order that people ask them. But sometimes you'll see me jump. Yeah, and I'm making decisions about who, like sometimes I go, I want Mickey to answer this one first because I know that I just want to be done with it. Like that's an answer. Like I just know Nikki will just answer it, and we can just go on to the next question. And so, for an audio question or whatever, I just go, like let's just throw that. Or I want Mickey to have the last word. Just as an example. And I do this with a lot of you, with people that I think have if there's a web question, I'm often going to want to put Ken either in the front or the end. And so the idea is that I think about where people go based on whether I want them to have the first word or the last word, mostly, in that sense. And so I can control that by the order in which I select it. Let's go to Guy.
Yeah, I mean, so much of communication is nonverbal, and being on the panel, I can see this different view of people laughing and nodding their heads or like giving you the, hey, are you sure about that type look? And a lot of that's not seen by the YouTube viewers or the people just watching the webinar. And so seeing something where it grows, like maybe shrinks and grows, active speaker becomes larger, but the 3 or 4 that have their hand raised are still lingering on screen to see if somebody's like, nah, I don't like the head nod, or just any of those kind of nonverbal cues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nigel?
Yeah, I was going to say 2 things. One, I was going to agree with what Guy just said. I miss some of the nonverbal cues and seeing how people react. The other thing is, and this may not be technically possible, but be interesting if there was for the panelist a preview way of knowing you're about to go on. Because often we're looking elsewhere, and it'd be nice to know in 3 seconds you're going to be on so we can look like we're paying attention.
Yeah, there's no feedback loop yet. There's a lot of discussion about providing feedback to the panel of all kinds. We want to be able to tell you that you're about to go live. I want to be able to, we already have some tools in the background to send you messages, but there could be a lot more that's in a heads up display that isn't available just yet. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would suggest that it's not so important to have the question answerer on screen, but the question itself, because not everybody is paying attention, or they may come in later on at some point.
I think it's just a little weird. I think it's a little weird when you hear someone just the voice of whatever. Here's the next question. I like seeing the person ask it. I think that's my only.
Or the question is there in type, larger than life, so they can see it.
Or the questioner is to one side and the type is there. I do think it's nice to have the questioner, be there to see it. I mean, I think that's part of the kind of the personal connection to that. But Ken?
Yeah, it's interesting, all the feedback people are giving, doing the switching now, and where there's only the 2 options, speaker view or gallery view. And sometimes, yes, I like the granularity of being able to see the reaction from Chris or that.
Well, and that we actually have the tools to do all of it. So that hasn't, so that it can do a follow, but it can also do there's a couple of different things that we're working on there. Number one is you can, within Universe, select any of, I believe Jonathan can correct me, but I think you can select any of the inputs if you wanted to. So you could override. It can go to active speaker, it can go to gallery, but you could also just override it in Universe and just be tapping on the inputs. So you can still edit it. The other thing that we're working on is what we call soft selection, which is something that we built into Hangouts long ago with APIs, which says only pay attention to these 3 people. So when you're auto cutting, I only want you to auto cut among these 3 or these 2 or these 4. So if someone else coughs or does something else, don't bother with them. And then the other thing that we did with Hangouts that was incredibly powerful. It seems like a stupid, simple thing, but we had dials on our little, I think they're called VCS 1000s, these little Behringers with little motorized faders. We took the dials and we controlled the attack. So for every person, so it would save an attack view, how quickly it cuts to them per person. Like it would say, you know, I'm going to attack Chris at a certain level, because some people, we found that the way they talk, some people you want to cut right to them, and some people you want to, you know, make sure that they're really ready to go. And so we'd play with that, and you sit there while you're doing the show, just constantly changing those and then it would get, as soon as you got the attack right, the whole thing just flowed. You know, it was just like, and then you'd be soft selecting between the 2 or 3 people that you wanted. And so there's a whole different way of editing that I think we're going to slowly find our way to, that we did a decade ago, but now we're able to put this into a much more powerful system. And Isadora is, I have to say, Isadora, the combination of all the apps, Isadora, Universe, Mix Effect Pro, you know, all of these apps working together is really exciting, you know, about what we're able to actually produce. Next question. Oh, Ken, I'm sorry. Did I get to you, Ken?
You did.
Yeah, you did. I
did, Ken. Sorry.
Yeah.
I get it.
Alex, Andy had his hand raised. I don't.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
He might have given up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the order in which you are accepting the super source in the backend in Mukana matches the order of the super source that's on screen in theory. So if I cut over to that, these should have been the order that people from top, you know, going across the top row and then coming down. This should have been what was available.
Yep.
Yeah, there you can see it now. So that should match what was in the Mukana answering. So you have a lot of control, Alex, as you're determining not only who's going to speak for the order of the conversation, but also what that means visually when we get to the look. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I can do, what I've been thinking about, is the ability of, like, 8 people, like in this case, 8 people raise their hand. I can just pick 4, push them to the top part, have it be a 4 up, and then start bringing people in and out, you know, based on accepting people, you know, can be another thing that's there too.
And I'm wondering, Alex, is the panel aware of how this is being cut, in terms of like the fact that it's a web controller that is just, you log in and you have access to it?
Yeah. So for everyone, go ahead and explain it, Andy, if you.
Yeah. So part of what was exciting about the project was to have the ability to control all this hardware from anywhere in the world. And so what we're doing here is we're taking Universe's web controller, and we're using Cloudflare Quick Tunnel to put it behind a password. So anybody who goes to that web URL, puts in the password, authenticates with the email, we figure out if you're supposed to have access. If you do, you get access to the Universe control panel. So right now I'm just on an LTE connection, and I've got the controller up on my phone, and I can go ahead and cut the show from here. So I can take us back to the gallery, and you can watch it kind of on the screen behind me, or even if we cut full screen to it up here, you know, you'll see that I'm able to kind of freely cut between the different looks here. I'm going to Alex, and then I think we're on input 5, so I can cut here. You can see that. So all sorts of stuff that we can do, and back to the super source, you know, so you have full access to the control panel from anywhere in the world, as long as you have some sort of internet connection and you can get to this URL. And so it's pretty cool.
And the goal is that what we're really kind of working through as we keep on moving this forward is being able to have different roles, so different screens for different people doing things. So the person managing questions, the person managing graphics, the person managing the edit, can all have their own windows that don't require VPN, that don't require anything else. And we've also abstracted all the complexity of the switcher away from them. They don't have to think about that. They just need to tap on the buttons that they need to run this specific show. And there's a whole bunch of it that it's just doing on its own for them, you know, as it starts to work. It doesn't mean that someone would need no skill, but it means that we could probably sit down with someone. The goal is we could sit down with someone for an hour or 2 and they'd understand how it all runs. And the real goal is that as we get into Office Hours 2.0, we're going to ask people who wants to play, you know, who wants to do this each day, the same way we do edits now, but except it'll be editing on that system. And people can just take it on, you know, easily. And so then so people are learning how to use that system, but then within a couple of weeks, we'll have it all in the back. There'll be another room that you're all watching that you can listen to the comms, you know, and listen to the team that I'm hoping to build. I know this will sound outrageous right now, but I'm hoping to get to a point where on a daily basis, there might be 20, 30, 40 people working on the show, in the background, that are just, some people are doing the Carl graphics that pop up with products, and some people are doing maybe a little bit of research on the questions that are coming through, so that the panelists have, here's some links you might want to look at before you get to that question, and like a whole bunch of other, and then we have people pushing the graphics and pushing cameras and so on and so forth, and so you end up with this larger group of people. They're all on comms talking to each other, making the show work. And then the idea is there's a whole bunch of other folks that are watching the show through the back end, the way we've watched Mad in the Kitchen and so on and so forth. And so the goal is that people are learning how it runs, and then they volunteer to do it, and then they get to be part of it. And hopefully they kind of move through all the different roles. And then at some point people say, hey, I want to use this for my own show. And now you have a whole bunch of people who first volunteer, like we do with the Belfast method or the Mobley process or whatever. But already we're already starting to see people turn these training missions into real projects, where we're able to, and so if someone see, because the way when we really want to think about office hours, this process of having 15 to 20 people in a panel is crazy. Like no one, like we would tell people, like, we want to, back in Hangout days, they'd say, we want to have 10 people. And I'm like, that's crazy. Don't do 10. I don't even know if I could do the show at less than 10 people. But part of it is because we have so many subject experts in one place, we can field almost any question. Now, if you apply that to any conference that you go to, imagine just having, rather than all these like pedantic, slideshows and discussions and everything else, you have a bunch of really smart people that are up there to answer your questions, and you're just able to ask them, just ask those questions, and you've got a bunch of scientists, or you've got a bunch of videographers, or a bunch of directors, or whatever, answering the questions from their perspective. That's a much more interesting show, in my opinion. But the big part is how do we clean it up so that it really looks like something that's competitive with what we turn on every day. It's when we turn on the TV, and I think we're getting to a point already where we're about to produce something that's better. Like we're about to produce something that looks better, sounds better, is more interesting than much of what we see on TV. And that empowers a whole slew of other special interests, and so, but what we're going to be able to do is be the ones that understand how to actually make that conversation work, because we've been practicing for 500 sometimes. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think that's a very good point, because it is looking more like a broadcast. I really like that 6-up example that you were just showing there, Andy. And the background doesn't bother me. I think it's a nice background, but the question would be, how much do we put into it? And should it be soft so it doesn't interfere with what's going on in front of it? Maybe it should be animated, but it should be a soft looping animation.
Yeah, like slow. I'm probably going to lean towards darker background, cooler background. That's my tendency, is like dark blues with highlights and stuff like that to make it work. But I like to be clean, and we also wanted to take advantage. We want it to be darker, but we want to have highlights that are really going into the HDR space, because we're going to be pushing that as well. Let's go to the next question.
Comes from Dennis Champion Walker. I noticed grey lines just over a pixel wide between Panelist's video in the SuperSource gallery yesterday. Is that happening in their video?
Yeah, I don't know what that. I wasn't able to look at it deep enough. Is that go ahead? Jonathan.
Yeah, I believe that's happening in the MV16. So we're outputting a 4K signal from the MV16, and I see on our internal monitors the same small gray pixel. So maybe we can put some Mortis or some overlay on top of that to get rid of it. But that's what we see.
I definitely want to put a Mortis around the. I feel like it's too bland. So I think that when we go to the gallery, we're going to want some kind of Mortis. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but definitely something that separates it out. That separates between those lines. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Alex, first before we jump.
Of course, we don't actually have to have 16:9 in that gallery. So there's more space to put stuff around people. The more in that 16:9.
To put mortises around. Yeah. I mean, the reason that it's 16 up or 9 up is because of the limitation of the multi-view. So, because we're not building that out, in something else. So go ahead, Sky.
And if somebody could, maybe Alex, the definition of mortise, I know some people call it frames, but mortise is kind of an in term.
Yeah, mortise is just the edges that we put around the video frames. is the mortise in this case. Next question.
Comes from Cape Town, and it's Hashmik Gajar. He says, some have stated in Mukana that the audio sync in the Office Hours 2.0 feed is perfect. I watched the Zoom app meeting as an attendee and noticed some sync issues.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
So among the panelists itself, looking inside of the Zoom call, your sync isn't perfect. Even here, like Alex at the beginning of the show, you were in Zoom actually slightly out of sync, maybe a frame.
Right.
So it wasn't perfect there. So I think when we're pixel peeping inside of the Office Hours 2.0 stream, the first step is, should we be receiving it in sync just based on the Zoom delivery? And JJ was very helpful and looked into like the server settings and where we are and where the Zoom is routed from. And there was some weird stuff going on in terms of just looking inside of Zoom. But then going out to stream, there are some sync questions that we have to answer. Now, today is too early to evaluate audio video sync. When you see the way that this thing is put together, it's kind of horrifying what we're doing with the sync there. But eventually, I think we'll be able to have a more robust solution for this. The things to keep in mind will be like, if we cut to the Smart Gallery, which goes up through the MV16 and back to the Constellation, does that have a different sync than just going in and getting a panelist directly into the system? We have to watch how many hops up and down the rack we're doing, so we can keep track of how to keep everything frame synced. But a little too early for us to determine that. We just wanted to make sure we had some audio for today, but and none of this is clocked right now. We don't have a reference generator, talking to all the equipment. So we're not setting ourselves up for success right now with a good sync. But I think the good news is we're not wildly off either. I think we'll be able to tighten it down and get it perfect, but we're not setting ourselves up for that today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I was going to play my Chris Fenwick card and say, Andy, with that mask on, you are in perfect sync. Just say.
Let's go jump into the next question.
Comes from Christian Turi in London. I was hoping Office Hours 2.0 would have more interactive features. Are you planning on any of these, like instant polls, live Q&As, allowing the person asking to post comebacks, give more prominence to the chat, etc.?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny as I read the question about it being interactive. It's probably the most interactive show on the internet because of how we do questions. But I get the point. But if we think about the heart of what this show is about is actually the interactivity of the questions. But I have talked about it before with the possibility of someone giving sometimes someone asks a question, they get a couple of answers in, and there might be just a key bit of information that they could add to that question after someone's answered it, and it could be half a sentence or just a model number or something that they could really fire back quickly, and that could be really helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Engaging the viewers, it makes sense. Stack Overflow has the ability to vote up the questions and the answers, and maybe there's some future place where the answers get voted on too, because then
you can do that now. you can actually, it's actually hidden in there. You can double click on the answer and vote on it. So but the there's a lot of things. The polls are already there. We just don't use them that much because we don't have anyone to do it. So the technology is already available as from a polls perspective. I also think that my goal at some point is to have people who have already been tested for video, people that we already know are known to us that are asking the question, and then we can invite them. Like if Guy is asking a question or Grant's asking a question, and they're saying, "Hey, I if I know that they're already there and they click a little button that says I'm video ready, like I know that I'm okay, to come in, and we see the question and we want just a little bit more information. I want to get to a point where we can click on it and just pull them right into the show. Like just have them have a direct link and just yank them into the show to ask them a question. I don't want to open that up to everyone because we haven't tested them, and we have to always. The one thing I learned from Leo is that we always want to keep in mind the general audience listening, not just the questioning audience. And so we have to be very careful of bringing someone in that's got suddenly in traffic or, has a really bad mic or something that ruins the experience for the overall set of viewers. We don't usually have people ask questions in person if you give me a show to run, I won't even let people stand up at a mic in a room to ask questions, because I hate listening to people drone on about something they wanted to say and then follow it up with a question that no one cared about. And so, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, just the flat out, that's what happens at events. I mean, I've sat through hundreds of them, and there is that special moment between the speaker and someone asking a question once per show. And then there's, 50 other questions that are just like, oh my goodness, just get to the point. And so one of the reasons that we shorten the questions and we're like, it keeps it moving, and that's part of what makes this work, is not that we don't drone on, on the questions, and we figure out how to say it. And as someone who's, been on Twitter for over a decade, I love the haiku of saying something in a limited number of characters. It's not just, you have to think about, like, I write most of my Twitters at about 300 words. It always comes out 300 characters. Then I start removing things and changing the words and moving it around and and then I get it down to just that thing. You'll find that most of my tweets are with one character left because I've squeezed it all in and reformatted it to fit just into that little box. Go ahead, Alex.
This is more a statement than the question, which of course is the red flag that you have when you're at events, when somebody stands up and says, I was just thinking, maybe we might want to introduce, when you're ready at some point, when you've got graphics, for people to including in their question to ask for a poll on the question. So not just the people who are answering on the panel, but the people who are watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say almost the same thing, that I could totally see, and this is also to Grant, I could totally see like a polling team. Like you could put a couple of people on, hey, let's compose a poll about this. Let's, and then they have a way of interjecting it so that you see, well, instead of it going first to the next question, we do have a poll about this. Let's see what the audience thinks.
And we don't even have to talk about it. We can just have the polls pop, because right now the way Mukana works, we just have the polls just pop up while we're talking about the question. And those can be something you can either ignore or vote on or whatever. And I think that getting more of that would be a lot of fun. There's all kinds of interaction that's possible. What we're doing right now is just getting what we have working. And then you're going to see us every week. There'll be some new little thing of a way to include the audience a little bit more, way to have them. I mean, we're still, in my opinion, office hours. I mean, we've done all of this with almost no budget, to get to where we are now. And we're at 1% of what we can do. Like we're literally at one. I mean, don't think that I think that we're at 90%. I think that we're, with Office Hours 2.0, we're at 1% of our capacity of what we could get done. So there's a long way for us to go. Next question.
You remember on the farm, Alex, those animals never asked questions, did they? So getting back to the farm again.
They kicked a lot. So anyway, that's a certain question or an answer. All right.
We do too.
Yeah.
Christian Turi, again from London. I don't really like the grid view. Panelists look too small and most of them are not talking, so why show them?
Go ahead, Chris.
I like the grid view because I can see all of the audience. I like the wide shot. When I'm directing even just a 2-person interview, I actually go to that center shot a lot. I like to see the scale of what I'm watching, and it's okay that they're not talking. They are part of the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's too early to judge as far as how the gallery view gets used, but they're the horses in the pasture, looking on to see what the guy.
Keep on coming back to these horses. Yeah, I probably overplayed that one. Anyway, I think that the thing about about it is just giving you context of these are all the people that are here, and I think it gives you a breath. And we're not going to. I don't think we're going to sit on the grid very often for very long. It also gives us somewhere to go when it's an undefined variable. So, like for instance, we can have 6 people, but what happens when we get to the end of that? Do we bring more people in, or do we just go back to the grid because we don't have another way to do it? So, anyway, next question.
Again from Christian Turi, got 2 identical Dell 27-inch 1440p screens. I put the Office Hours 2.0 YouTube full screen in one and Zoom full screen in the other. Zoom looks better. Other pre-recorded YouTube 1440p videos look better than Office Hours 2.0 1440p live. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I will say that wasn't my experience yesterday. I was looking at it more yesterday from the stream, that it looked significantly sharper on than what we see in Zoom. Go ahead, Andy.
We have to define looks better. Does that mean color space? Does that mean resolution? What does that mean? Because I know there's a question coming up in the queue about color space, so I'll save that conversation for then. But we need more. I think we would need more information than just better. Like, is it frame rate? Is it, there's definitely a lot of things we still need to improve. There's a little bit of black flickering in here. Like, I definitely understand that, but this feed should be sharper than Zoom because we're at 1080, and when we're in the gallery view, we're really appreciating 4K.
Yeah.
I will say that if you're looking at 1080 Zoom versus the live stream, again, it's a 1080. So we're not capturing you at 4K each panelist. We're capturing you at 1080, and then we're streaming you at 4K. So I wouldn't expect a huge difference there between a 1080 and a 4K. It's just an upsample, but we should be a lot sharper, and that's been my experience looking at it.
And go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say the same thing. I know that on YouTube, a lot of people's systems will default to like 1080. You have to click on that little gear or whatever it is and tell it to show you the 4K version.
Yeah. Next question.
Comes from Dennis Champion Walker. A few of us have noticed the color in Office 2.0 YouTube stream is desaturated compared with the video on Zoom and Office Hours 1.0 YouTube. He's done a side-by-side as the picture there.
It could be the original version of the let me take a look here. Oh, it's really minor. So the original project that I'm using in AWS was based on a PQ output, or an HDR10 output. So and I just forced it to 709, and rather than having it follow. So we need to go back and look at the color. So the color could definitely be off or not as good, or it could be more accurate. I don't know yet. So I need to, it's on my punch list to go back and look at whether we need to do some color correction as we pass through that. But so there may be some work there to be done. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with you on the accuracy. The accuracy may equate to looks different, and when you compare it to something that has crushed blacks or does its special tap dance on top of the video, until you get this done, it's best not to tweak it because there may be color correction at the end that needs to be done.
Well, wait until you see me turn it to PQ. So when we go to HDR10, everything's gonna look really bright. So we're gonna promote everybody forward. So that'll be a whole different experience. Go ahead, Andy.
Two other quick thoughts on that. The first one, roping back to the previous question, just occurred to me. They were watching a 1440p stream. That's YouTube downsampling our 4K to 1440 in real time. I don't know that that's going to look as good because we're streaming 4K native. So you should definitely compare sharpness at the native resolutions of each streaming platform versus an automatic downsample. Right. Number two, I agree that there definitely is a difference in the color space. I'm finding that we're a little less saturated here on the 2.0 side, and we're a little bit green shifted as well. And so I think that obviously we haven't put any consideration into color just yet. I mean, we've thought about it, but we don't have any hardware in here to actually do the color correction yet. But I'm actually optimistic. I was just talking to Jonathan about this, that we are at a better place to do color correction with the color space that we're in than Zoom, which has kind of the way that Zoom is doing it is losing a bit of depth in some of the color areas, so that I would worry that it would be harder to correct out of. I think this is going to stretch better. Honestly, I think that we have more detail here to stretch than we do in the RTMP from Zoom.
And then one thing that I think we're going to try to do is route between our master control, the main 090 server system, and here put another set of SDIs out so that we can go to and from one of the FSHDRs, and then we can sit there and start to tweak it, and potentially, I mean, as early as fast as JJ could run more lines, we could potentially, as early as tomorrow, be streaming in HDR10, if we did that. So that'd be kind of fun. So we'll play with that. Anyway, next question. Oh, lost it.
Yes. Sorry. It's funny. After saying how great the Stream Deck is, it just died on me.
No comment.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I don't use it for that.
It never does.
What's finally showing up for me is I finally went and bought I talk about it, and then I hadn't bought one But someone mentioned that they can hear me swallowing my tea, and so you've noticed that I now, when I'm swallowing, I'm now muting, and now that I'm muting all the time, I'm super annoyed, and so then I went and bought this Studio Technologies my mic thing, so I can sit there, I'm mute and unmute. So anyway, yeah. So
Okay, so from Taluk in New York, this is clearly a game changer. I find the smart active speaker to be much more watchable. How do you think about where to put delays on the switch, if any? Is that attack?
Yeah, I think that might be the attack. So that basically, eventually, we want to be able to set an attack where we can set it per person, and it remembers, oh, that person has this attack when I'm going to go to them. That's the eventual place that we want to go. It might be hard to do that immediately because everybody has a different vocal structure in it. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I'll say that in terms of difficulty, it's actually the hard part is determining the behavior. To actually do this, we now have control of the active speaker cut. So we're in a position with Isadora that we just have to build out whatever nodes we want to define whatever behavior we want. But I'm actually optimistic that even I'm going to say this and then I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, but I'm optimistic that even by tomorrow we could have a first version of cutting soft selection and then setting some parameters for attack and decay. It's just a database on our side, but understanding how the workflow works for determining that attack and then storing it and then recalling it. Obviously that's a lot of work, but I think that we did the hard part, which was get control of the cut. Now that we have control of the cut, we can build the behavior to be able to do it.
Right. Absolutely. Alex.
The editing term would be a J cut because we hear them first before we see them. And that's the way life works, of course. If you're looking in one direction, you hear someone, it takes time for you to turn to see them. So it's very natural.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question. Can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not used to this. I love when Andy answers a question every time. It feels like a mic drop. You just need to pick up a mic every time and then just throw it down at the end. It's so good. From Kyle in Chicago, Illinois. Will Office Hours 2.0, sorry, I did miss one. Sorry. Christian Turi, how are we going to solve the latency issue on Office Hours 2.0 YouTube, or is it expected that only the silent viewers will use the YouTube feed and others will continue to use Zoom?
Yeah, so I think that we're going to end up with a viewing opportunity, at least the behind the scenes, a viewing opportunity that isn't still in Zoom. I'm still thinking through that process. I think that we could theoretically, the way you've seen it up until now, you could see the edit in here. One of the things I'm thinking about is having multiple. So my thought process at the moment, and it may change when we actually try to do it, but this is how it works in my head, is that after hours will run 24/7. So there'll be some time that we've decided during the day. It might be noon, 5 or whatever. We'll play a little music at the very end. We'll show a little fire or something or something like that. Or we'll show the office hours flag waving. How a little CG office hours flag, and it'll be waving, and then we'll turn it off. And then we'll turn it right back on again. Say, and I think we should turn it on with the bars, like the bars and like a little like, and then it turns on again. And then, so there'll be some point in the day that we change the event. We just close it and open it because it won't last forever. Then, office hours will be a room inside of after hours. And then the behind the scenes of office hours will be another room. And then possibly there could be a viewing room that is just, I don't want to watch the behind the scenes. I want to watch office hours, but there's a bunch of us watching it together. You can kind of watch it up there. And that would still be low latency. The highest quality version of it will be the YouTube stream. It will look better, sound better. If you have an HDR TV, it will look amazing. Eventually, if you have an Atmos system, it'll sound amazing, or at least 5.1, it'll sound amazing. So there'll be other values to using the YouTube one. In addition to that, once we have that finished feed, it won't just be YouTube. So it's mostly for us to get data. So we want data about all the other social networks, about like how long do people watch it and what are they doing. And so what we would probably do is have, we'll probably stream to Facebook and Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, it'll just go out to all of these. And then we're also going to be posting a better audio feed. And so there's a bunch of things that it'll go out in a lot of different ways when we light it up in the future. Next question. Oh, sorry, Alex, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe once we formalize how we do second screen experiences, If we second screen always on YouTube or a certain platform, once we've got their time codes, then when we play back the second screen experience, we can just embed the other thing that we're reacting to, and then have even a fader between the two. So we could say have an Apple YouTube feed, and then it would have all our comments on it. And actually, when playing it back, we'll be able to see our commentary on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's somewhere in the future, when I say we're at 1% right now, there's somewhere in the future that we're streaming to our own CDN, and that's the only place to watch it. And then all the metadata and everything else gets fed into it, and all the other bits and pieces. But that's, right now it's less expensive to do it this way and easier. Next question.
Kyle from Chicago. Will Office Hours 2.0 be streaming to Alex's YouTube, or will it be set up on a new YouTube channel to rebrand?
As soon as we move to where this is the primary, it's going to go to its own brand on YouTube. And the hard part there is that we have to then build up the following again. So I just have to, and then I have to get it all done. And up until a day ago, I really haven't had time to think for about a year and a half. So while we've been doing this, in addition to doing all the office hour stuff, I'm still in a full-time job, and we're slowing my schedule down a little bit. And so I'm able to and so what I'm going to be working on is how do we hand off roles. And so as we figure one of the roles that Jeffrey will most likely head up is the YouTube role of just managing the new YouTube channel. I think Ken already manages the web channel. Jeffrey will be working on that piece, and we'll keep on handing off kind of department heads of things to kind of start managing, and then hopefully people will volunteer to be helping on those teams, and there'll be a bunch of processes as we kind of move forward. But getting the YouTube channel and the Facebook channel and the LinkedIn channel and all those things are going to be things that we need to set up over the next couple of weeks. So my hope is that it's ready to go at the end of next week. One thing I haven't done is I haven't gone to the Pixel Core YouTube page. There's still a Pixel Core channel that has 18,000 followers. And so what I'm going to start doing is cross-branding that for a little while, to Facebook or to Pixel Core as well as there, to kind of try to pull people. But I didn't do that with my channel because I didn't want to do that. So I'm waiting for the new channel to come up so I can push everybody that direction as well. Go ahead, Alex.
It may be possible with last week on Office Hours to start moving things over there and encouraging people to watch this here. Oh, by the way, if you want to catch up with last week on Office Hours, and all of us who want to refer to any specific topic at any specific time code on Twitter or Facebook, and we start sharing little, kind of the breadcrumbs to the old lady's house, really, in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to do is do more than just Office Hours in the new Office Hours one, and have us doing little reviews and little first views and our opinions and things, and make it kind of one of those places that we can, if someone wants to build a video to put on there, I mean, there'll be some process of approval to put them on there, but people could contribute to that as well, because it might give a lot of times those shared channels, even if you have your own channel on YouTube, the shared channel can get a lot of views, and then it brings more people back to yours. And that's the goal, is to use that amplification process. So that you might be building 10 videos a week for your own channel, but you put one of them on the Office Hours one, because if all of us do that, that viewership will get really big, and it'll help focus things back onto the folks that are in their individual channels as well. Next question.
Another one from Talok. Where does the small black flicker come from on the panelists?
Go ahead, Andy.
Sorry, we're doing a bunch of stuff. The black flicker is well, first of all, there's a couple of things here. None of the systems running on reference clock. So we could be misaligned in terms of the decklink output to the Constellation input to the MV16. None of that is synced right now at a frame level. So we need to put a reference in there. We also are still working. We're running a beta build of Zoom ISO to run 2.0. And that build, we're still trying to figure out the right way to handle pulling a frame from Zoom, which is a variable frame, and then outputting a constant frame rate from that. And so there's, every now and then it's possible that we're missing a connection there on our end. But I think the first thing we should do before we get into all like recoding Zoom ISO, we should put a reference clock in the system and see what that does for us, and make sure that we're doing our part to give it the best chance it can have of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
From Jason Fitzgerald from New York City. Does the panel have a real-time program return so they know when they're on air, or another kind of tally indicator?
Right now, we're feeding it back into the panel view, so the panel can see it. We're not feeding that return back into the YouTube stream. So this input is actually told to be not available. so it doesn't it's not available in the YouTube stream, but we do get it back within the panel view. So that's the first step. Again, when we talk about where we want to go, we absolutely want specific returns that are going back to the panelists that have tally and notes and all the panel view. Eventually, I want to put as a heads up display, over top of the video that they're looking at, but that'll take a little bit of time. Next question.
Again from Dennis in the UK. The bottom corners of the panelists' videos are rounded in the super source gallery, but not the top corners. With the videos touching each other, this looks a bit odd. This is also happening today on the single shots.
Go ahead, Andy.
First, everything's going to go on a mortise, so you probably won't see it anymore at that point. We'll be able to cut off a little bit there on the edge. This has to do with how Zoom is delivering the video rounded on Mac OS. So we have to, because those floating windows on Mac are rounded at the bottom, and the top menu bar is straight. So it's kind of like a U shape, and it's very, very minor.
I didn't even notice that.
It's so small at 1080. It's like a couple of pixels in the corner. If you go down to like 360, for example, it becomes much more exaggerated, the incidence of that curve. But it's very slight right now, and I think it's so slight that it'll go away inside of a mortise. So I'm not super concerned about it. We are thinking about things in Zoom ISO, like should we give you the option to generate video with letterboxing, and then automatically determine the size of that letterbox and deliver the video pre-trimmed from that, so that we don't hit the rounded corner at the bottom of the Mac window. But that's a lot of work, to be honest. And for a couple of pixels at 1080, I don't know that that's our biggest concern at the moment, but it's definitely there, and there's definitely things we can do about it.
Next question.
Comes from Hashmik in Cape Town. I am watching the Office Hours 2.0 YouTube feed, and the Zoom Office Hours event itself as an attendee. The Zoom app as an attendee stayed on speaker view mostly. Is this a means to feed into Office Hours 2.0?
No, I think that's probably Sky's choice. It's still being driven in a straight edit. The Office Hours 2.0 and the Office Hours current, the old version, we'll call it Office Hours Legacy, is they're completely separate. So one doesn't affect the other one at all, which is one of the real powers of the way we're doing it. What we were going to do by doing it all in the system where everybody has a room, a Zoom room, and it's all isolated, which has its own advantages, was going to require us to just do one day where we're one way and another day when we're another, and that was going to be pretty traumatic. In this case, we're able to do kind of a soft handoff where we're still doing the same thing we've been doing the whole time, but when we're ready, there'll just be some day where the YouTube link that is inserted into the system is no longer the older Zoom. So it's a softer solution. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I try to listen to the story, and I try to, if there's reactions that I feel that the audience is going to enjoy the other reactions of the other panelists, I try to go to the gallery, but otherwise, I try to stay with the main person speaking and let Zoom take care of that.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. This has turned into a ruthless review, I think, of Office Hours 2.0. The six-up super source.
And by the way, it should be. I mean, we should be. It's not just Q&A. For once a week, we're going to just tear this thing apart, and it may. I'm saying that we're going to tear it apart for the rest of the year. We may have one day a week that we tear it apart for the next year, where we're like, what if we did this one weird little thing? And what if we, created something that the goal is to really evolve it, and so iterate and dominate. All right.
Well, it's good. It's good that Jonathan and Andy are wearing the masks, because the tears that are just rolling down their face are being hidden by the masks, just as everyone's picking on them. So Douglas Carmichael, the 6-up super source boxes seems to be too close together on the left side. Can the super source layout be changed?
Oh yeah. what's really cool. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so right now these super sources are laid out mostly for us to be able to just confirm that we've got the super sources 1 through 8 working with the automatic system pulling in from Mukana. We have a lot of thoughts on how to change these, to change the borders around them as well as just the layouts. We also want to add the host back into the super source layout. In addition, the question reader as well into the layout. An example could be to have the question reader in the super source layout on the side next to the host, reading the question, and then when they're done, their video could disappear so that it's just the host and the panelists. There's a lot of ideas of what could happen with this. Right now, we're just testing just so we have a basic understanding. We also want to optimize for animations. You may have seen a few times that the super source will dynamically animate as somebody comes in or goes out. And it looks cool, usually, not always, depending on the certain numbers of super sources. And so we want to optimize and try to find the right way to make that possible without overdoing it.
Right. No, absolutely. And we're really going to be building a new language that visually, we're building a new language that we haven't seen in other TV shows. Like we're doing something that, to my knowledge, hasn't existed before. So we're going to see a bunch of things, and we're going to keep on interactively going, well, that didn't really work. Or that's really weird, or it makes me uncomfortable. And we'll have to keep finding the answers, as opposed to trying to, look for them somewhere else. Next question.
Comes from a good friend of mine, Grant Whitehead from Adelaide, Australia. Andy, what extra functions are you gaining from using the Zoom apps?
Go ahead, Andy.
I don't use Zoom apps because I don't have anything that's currently integrated with them. I get the Zoom SDKs, which are different. So there's the client meeting SDKs. There's Zoom apps, which is basically a browser inside of the Zoom client that's for bringing in web content. And then there's the Zoom APIs and the video SDKs and all that. There's a very wide ecosystem of developer options available from Zoom, which is part of the reason we like it so much and that we can do something like this. But we're using the Zoom SDKs. The Zoom SDKs, with regards to video, don't give us anything special at this time. It's all stuff that we've had to engineer around it. But I'm optimistic that in the future we might have more options there, including with all sorts of other things that we could do once we have a better communication between the Zoom servers delivering video and audio and the SDK's ability to leverage that power, obviously with the correct security concerns and all of that. So I think, I'm optimistic that we'll see something like that in the future. Right now, Zoom ISO is really, it's really a sort of a cat and mouse game with the Zoom server to try to figure out how to get it to do what we want it to do. But I'm sure that in the future, there'll be better options to directly integrate.
And
so,
go
there's a follow-up there because of there's an icon now in the Zoom app that's saying apps accessing content in the meeting. Zoom OSC.
That's Zoom being inconsistent with the language that they're using to designate apps. A Zoom app is the thing that's in the bottom that you can deploy inside of your client. It may be the fact that they're sharing architecture between those two platforms, but we're not a Zoom app, and that's we're an application, so they might be shorting it. It's a different thing.
And we're seriously looking at how we're going to use Zoom apps for the panelists and even potentially for the viewers. So there's a bunch of things that we're looking at. We think that's a very rich field to plant in. We just haven't had the resources to do it so far. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Is it because you're using a low-level programming SDK, is it less likely they can break it for us with an update or a change?
Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, it's always a little bit of a game, to be honest, with every SDK release. I will say that, I've been developing on Zoom SDKs for the past year and a half. They've made dramatic improvements over the past year, especially. Like, it used to be that I was terrified of rebasing the SDK on a new version. I would do that months ahead of when I was planning to do a release. Now they've got it to a point where it really is swap the library out and most things work, and the release notes generally cover the problems that we might encounter. That was not the case a year and a half ago. So I really want to applaud them for making huge strides on that. But it's not perfect, but they're moving in the right direction.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. I noticed the equipment was on a desk, not in a rack. Is the long-term plan to rack the entire system with proper cable management? I added emphasis.
Proper. So the So I'm a big fan of when I'm developing something to not put it in a rack. So as I'm figuring stuff out, I do what I call gaffer racks, which is, if you look at the, they can't show it to you, but we literally take gaffer tape and I just put it down where the screws are. So I stack everything up and I just gaffer them so that they don't move around, right? They're all kind of stuck to each other. The reason I do this is because that I really am fixated on the idea of not pouring concrete until the forms are finished. And I think that what happens when you start putting something in a rack, it creates a structure that you're now going to use that for a long period of time, because it was a pain to put it in, it was a pain to take it out, it was a pain, and now you have to think about it. Now you have to reach in there, you might need a trumpeter, and you might, there's a whole bunch of things that you start figuring out there. So what I like to do is keep it opened and work on it. But I am obsessed with racks, and proper cable management and all those other things. And so once we go, this is what we're going to do, like at the end of the year or a month from now, we're going to go, this is what we're going to do for the next 3 months. This is the hardware structure that we want for the next 3 months or whatever. Then we put it in a rack. Probably won't go crazy with the cable management because it's still soft. But there'll be some point where we make it a hard thing. But I think that we're still figuring it out. And when we figure it out, we don't want to pour the concrete that would say this is. And I see companies do this all the time, and I've done it, where you build a kit too early and you wire it all in and you tie it all down and you get it all just right. And now the chances of you going back, you'll do somersaults in your design to get around the fact that you put one thing in too early or you cut the cable too short, and suddenly you're spending a day trying to figure out how to do something that you just would have just run it a different way if you knew to do it. So that's what we're going to stick with for a little while. Next question
comes from Jeff Nilsson in Lake Burton, Georgia. Maybe it's just my experience, but some of the participants' audio have pops and clicks. Not all of them, though. Sounds a lot like issues I had with Audio Hijack and StreamYard YouTube.
Andy, do you have any ideas?
Maybe the fact that the way that audio is currently rung is with a cable half plugged in so that we can get the TRS stuff to line up. It probably has something to do with that. We don't have a proper audio chain in here right now. We have a chain that works so that we can get something out for today, but we really need to take another look at how it's all set up. We didn't have the right breakout cable we needed for the Constellation, so we just have to look at it and get that set up right. It's very jank right now, and it's sitting literally on top of all the SDI cables, and we're not doing it any favors, unshielded, all that stuff. So yeah.
As someone who grew up in Western Pennsylvania, we call that Appalachian engineering. All right. Next question.
From Douglas, what tools will you be using to coordinate communication amongst teams? Will you use open source products like Nextcloud or paid products like Teams?
The communication between them generally will be Unity. That's most likely what we're going to do. There may be a point where we graduate to ClearComm, but that has a bunch of dependencies. But to start with, definitely Unity. Next question.
From Douglas again, would an A10 Mini Extreme ISO be a good start for a personal studio switcher to develop solutions like Andy's?
Andy? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I don't. It definitely could work. There's no reason. We're doing Mix Effect Pro, and it's just running it. It can run an Extreme the same way it can run something larger. You could have less people in there, and it could build all those things out. Go ahead, Andy.
Sorry, we just needed a second to finish talking about something. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can take an analog of this system and do it in other deployments. We've talked about even things like all the way down to like the pluggable adapters being a really cheap way to get HDMI out of an M1. Like there are ways to do this with an Extreme. We can't do everything we're doing right now. You'd have a much smaller panel. You'd have a much smaller, everything that they'd have to deal with at that level. But I think part of the idea is that we're doing this project as sort of a flagship high end, so that we figure things out that you can then incorporate into even the daily productions that you do as event producers, right? Like once we figure out good workflows for automatic super sources and things like that, like we can transfer that knowledge and the control of that. And a lot of it is honestly with, what we're doing in Isadora, it's extremely modular. Like I've written plugins for SPX and for Blackmagic and for, Mix Effect and all the different things that we're talking to. I've sort of figured all that out for you, so that then when you open up your new file, you can just pull those plugins in and make the interaction that you're looking for. So I don't think you have to spend, 30, 40, $50,000 on hardware to be able to get anything like this. I don't, this is a certain category of gear and a certain category of work, but there's lessons from it that could apply all the way down to daily production that, you're doing as part of your event services.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
How do you say that? Jan, is it?
Juan.
Juan. See, that's my Spanish showed. Since Office Hours 2.0 stream always will have some latency, will it be possible to match that latency with Mukana?
So at some point we want to match everybody up in Mukana, but the main thing is that what we actually want to do is match all the viewers up so that anybody interacting with Mukana is on the same latency. It doesn't matter what that latency is. I mean, the thing you have to look at is the question latency. Juan asked this question an hour and a half ago. So the thing is it being 20 seconds behind doesn't really matter. What it matters is everyone's on in the same time space. So there will be a point like, hey, if you go into if you're watching it inside of, I don't know what we're going to do about that process. Now we can go into low latency mode in YouTube. I don't know if I can do that at 4K though. So, it'll be 10 or 20 seconds behind. Again, in the way we deal with conversation, I'm not sure if that will significantly impact the conversation. So, or the experience. What will be weird is if people are ahead of something, but remember 10 seconds is not a very long time when it comes to discussing something. It's different when you're watching a game or sports, but less so. But even for me, I watch most football games about 20 minutes behind because then I can skip through all the ads. so if I don't have it's just a matter of reference to somebody else. Next question.
From Douglas, could the 2.0 software stack be productized so that it could be used for educational use cases?
It can definitely be replicated. Like once we get it figured out, first it can be replicated in hardware, then it can be replicated in the cloud. And so I think that there's a lot of different ways for it to be made more available. This is not something that I'm necessarily, we're not committed to making it a product that we're trying to sell. We're committed to it becoming something that everybody's using, and so we'll keep on showing you how we're building it and let other companies either build it into what they're doing. I think that the goal that I have related to it is, it's that by fixing this problem, we change the way people look at virtual events. Like when we fix this problem as a group, and I don't want it to be constrained by trying to figure out how to make money with it. So we may make money with it as we're the consultants that show you how to do it. We have lots of people that know how to use it. That's the big thing that we have here, but I want it to grow as fast as possible, throughout the system, because I think that we need to transform the way we look at our online experience. And I think it has a huge impact on the world, not just a monetary impact. People being able to gather from every continent and having an open conversation and being able to do all those things literally changes many things at many levels. And so we will continue to show our schematics and how we do it. So I guess I'm not going to call it open source. I have a thing about open source. So I'm not going to call it open source, but what I am going to say is it's very close to it. I'm not licensing it that way because I don't want to license it like, oh, you can't do it any other way. I just want people to use it. And if they figure out how to make money with it, that's great. So this isn't the business model I want to be in. Next question.
Douglas, again, when I zoomed into the full frame bars on the first test stream, I noticed macro blocking on the gray bars. Is that a YouTube compression artifact?
Most likely, yeah. It's just especially anything that's at certain places where YouTube doesn't think it's important. Next question.
Douglas again. Alex, I like your idea to bring people in quickly, but the structured process and flow, banter, talk, good morning, mic checks, final prep, standby show of office hours each day makes it feel more like a community. Will that stay with 2.0?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The big thing is that it'll be, what'll happen is the speakers will do a lot of that mixing in after hours and then just go into the room to do their final checks and go. So it'll be, and you'll be able to see that if you're sitting in the behind the scenes. So all of it will still be there. Next question.
Douglas, what would it take to get isolated audio from each panelist to enable members to mix the show live with a MADI connected mix engine?
It would take changes on Zoom's side, stuff that we can't control, but we can keep asking over and over and over again. I think that at some point, I think what we ought to focus on is going to Zoom feedback and just all of us at one time, like just decide that every day we're just going to post, hey, we're really looking for isolated audio. Go ahead, Andy.
So I think, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I think honestly, we landed on a bit of the wrong mark with the answer on isolated audio. So I'll push back a little bit. Zoom rooms do give you isolated audio embedded in the NDI, but that's not the same as getting isolated audio of everybody in the meeting. Because if I believe, for example, if I had 3 Zoom rooms, each with 3 different participants available to me, I think only 3 sources of audio are available to grab across all the sources at the same time. And that's part of the reason why 3 is the magic number, I think, with a Zoom room, because a Zoom client right now, if we all sang happy birthday, I think you'd only hear 3 people at a single given point in time. So that's an architectural question. So I think they're making good strides when it comes to delivery, but we have to sort of think about as producers, what is the importance of simultaneity among those things, and does it scale? So for example, with Zoom ISO, as we're thinking about audio, I want to deliver to you a 32 channel audio device. I'm only getting 3 inputs from the Zoom server. I need to make sure I plug those into the right places. So it's sort of I'm going to be interested to see what the switching is like on that and how it works. It goes all the way up to the very architecture that audio is shared through the Zoom system. And that's a big change. Pushing audio to the end client and giving us the waves that we need should be a relatively simple thing for them to do. And I'm optimistic that we'll see that. That's what we really need to get an understanding of this first. But I think that there might be more to the conversation following that, if simultaneity is really an important thing that we need, besides just emulated presence among those channels.
Right. Next question.
Yeah, can I just add? We did have a conversation with Zoom. Blue and I met with the product managers of Zoom meetings, and one of the things that we were requesting is the ability to temporarily unmute everyone to be able to get a reaction, and that was received well by them, because they are very interested in that the feedback that you would want from a large meeting. And so they were interested. And what we were saying is to be able to have the host as a priority over the audio of everybody else, but that you could essentially unmute everyone for a moment and get applause or get laughter or get something, right? And then be able to still have the host talk over everyone, and they would hear that as a priority.
Yeah.
And they were particularly interested in that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worth talking to them, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, next question.
Next question.
Douglas, what sort of fault monitoring, graceful shutdown, and startup will be added to the setup, e.g., power loss?
I think you skipped one. I think there was would there be a behind-the-scenes GitHub repository? I think we have a GitHub repository, don't we? I mean, we already have started to publish some of this stuff. Andy?
Yes. So on GitHub, we do have the OH Global GitHub, where a whole lot of stuff exists right now. It's fun experiments between all of the panelists who are sort of programming oriented, and we're looking for pull requests all the time. So definitely push stuff up there.
Yep.
Yeah, my plan is to make a lot of the stuff that we use in 2.0 accessible. A lot of it already is. The Blackmagic plugins and things like that are hosted up there. The Black Siphon configurator, Apple script is up there. So I've pushed up a lot of pieces already, and I'm going to continue to do so as we move forward. Yep. One thing I want to think about more, and I've actually been talking to Trickotronics about, is what is the best way to, as a group, contribute to a Isadora file? Because the Isadora file itself isn't an XML, it's a binary. So it's kind of weird to do that through a GitHub-based workflow. So I'm wondering if we can encourage or learn more about how to modify those files as a group. But for now, I think, the GitHub is alive and cooking. So check it out.
That's great. Next question.
Okay, so back to the fault monitoring and graceful shutdown startup.
We will slowly get to that. So, a lot of that stuff is, eventually this will be very robust, because we can theoretically have something on the web that's talking to 2 independent hardware systems that would simply need to be switched off inside of AWS. and they're both running the same show. And the way that this is built, it would be relatively easy for us to make that actually work. So it's just money, like there's hardware involved right now. So I think that that stuff will happen. Again, we're going to probably be living on the edge for a little while as we figure it out. The problem with adding redundancy, again, is you start pouring concrete. By adding redundancy before you're done means that, and also when we get to a certain number of viewers, we'll go, well, it'd be a big deal if it failed. And it's a big deal now, but the other thing is the redundancy we have at the moment is this, what we have right here. We can still broadcast to YouTube from Zoom and still have a show and still have a conversation. What we figured out how to do was build a great show with great people discussing it that look good and sound good. So that is our backup at the moment. And then all of this other stuff is just putting icing on that cake to make that work. Next question.
From Douglas again, after 2 to 3 Belfasts and countless questions and many hours logged on after hours, I'm concerned about finding a place in the 2.0 world. I understand some level of process will be required, but will there be plenty of places for innovation as well?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think ultimately we need to think of 2.0 as just another output, just a different. It's still the same show, it's still the same community, and I think that after hours is a key element of all of that. And then the main show is still open for people. Alex has said all along the way that we are increasing the quality all the time, but that doesn't mean that new people can't come along. And that's where after hours is a place to hang out and get your setup kind of honed in, and then still come on for that hour before and check, right? And see if things are okay.
And I think I really think of office hours as the tip of an iceberg. It's what people see. It's how we attract, it's I'll go back to another not farming, but another analogy is a fad. We call things a fad. A fad is a floating attraction device. It's a pile of junk that fishermen throw into the water. It'll attract, and it attracts things. And what happens is you see this little thing floating in the water in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And what happens is it's a safe place to go for the little fish. So the little fish go up in there, and then the bigger fish go trying to get the little fish, and then the bigger fish, show up, and then eventually the tuna show up, and then eventually the sharks show up. So you end up with this huge ecosystem that's under the water. So if you're on a ship, you can't see it. It's this giant machine, just millions of fish that are underneath this little pile of junk that's floating in the water because that junk created this floating attraction device. It attracted the ecosystem. And this is how they do what they call purseine fishing. And we've been using that technique for 2,000 years, at least, maybe more. Anyway, the point is office hours is the fad. Office hours is this little thing that floats along the top of the water that people see, and it attracts people into what it is. But the real community is in after hours. That's where the real gold is, of people just sitting there discussing stuff and crossing it. It's important to have office hours. It's important to have a concise 2 hours that we're going to answer a bunch of questions, and we go through more information in office hours than I see in almost any show I've ever seen. Just the amount of data that is being thrown around in office hours. But when you look at after hours, there's a whole group of people that you never see in office hours because they can't be in office hours. They can't be on a broadcast, and a lot of times they're hidden with their cameras off. You'll see, I know who they are. They're down there, and if you ask the right question, they'll suddenly come out of the woodwork and answer a question for you from a person that's working on that thing, that you're doing. And so I really think that after hours is really where there's an enormous amount of gold, and office hours is very, very important to growing after hours, and building that community. But I think that it is office hours is that fad, that is attracting people by showing how knowledgeable our folks are, and it's a great tool. It gives us a place. We can't, really get brands to come and show off their new equipment to after hours. It's just not enough. There's got to be a place to do that. It has to look good, and we want to, attract a large number of people once a day to have that conversation. But I wouldn't worry about whether you're, on camera in office hours. I would look at, there's going to actually be more places to contribute to office hours in all, because again, within 6 months, there's going to be 15 to 20 people in office hours on camera, and there'll be 30 to 50 people in the back end making the show happen, and interacting with each other and working all those things in. So I wouldn't get too fixated on that process, So I think that we want to figure out, where everybody, fits and how they fit. Go ahead, Mitchell.
The thing that really attracted me to, because I'm a relatively new joiner in office hours, is the sense of community that's being presented here. It's not like a podcast where there's one or two people. There's a whole community being represented, and the interaction is golden. So I really feel, connected with this group, and I think people, it's very easy to catch the fever.
And, there's going to be a lot of, I have been careful, I'll admit, until 2.0 goes on, I've been careful not to turn the after hours engines up too high as well, because it actually it saps energy from office hours, so as after hours for some people has become so interesting, they don't show up at office hours very often anymore. And so, I have to manage that, I have to manage the air fuel mix, so to speak, of making those things work, because if I turned after hours up too high, office hours would disappear. It would fade off. And so as office hours starts to grow into this area, you'll see me turn after hours slowly up at the same time and keep on building that, building up. And that's going to be in the form of labs. You're already seeing it. Saturday is mostly an after hours or other thing. We're only on air now Saturday from 7 to 8. And then it really becomes truly an after hours thing. It's still in the office hours thing, but it's really non-broadcast at that point. And so you'll see us continue to move that way, where office hours will continue to stay where it's at. And it may get, over time, office hours may grow into multiple shows and, be going into that thing. But I think you're going to keep on seeing after hours get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that's, again, when I think of that office hours being that little thing floating in the ocean, and then this huge community sitting inside of after hours and Discord and everything else that has grown from that. This is just the gateway. So anyway, it was a great conversation. I think we're going to have fun over the next couple weeks, couple months, couple years to kind of building this thing out. But it's interesting, and the reason I think we just have to keep examining it. And I don't, these are my opinions at the moment. 3 weeks from now, I may have a completely different set of opinions after we experience it, because we don't have anywhere to study, we don't have anywhere to read. We are in the jungle together, figuring this out. This is and if we figure this out, it will. It impacts a lot, to figure out how to have this conversation powerfully and have it look beautiful. And the reason it look beautiful means something is because it means that other people can see it. They're used to watching TV, and we have to do something that they can understand. We already understand the conversation. And so, and I think it'll allow us to accelerate a lot of things. Andy, did you have anything last notes there? Oh, I thought I was end up. We're going to say Grant.
I was just going to say that in the early days of after hours, I got on and I was able to show Zoom OSC, and I was able to demo it, and I demoed it in front of Andy. Had no idea that Andy was in the room, and so Andy, I just wanted to offer that again. If you need me to demo Zoom ISO for you or anything that you're doing there, I'm happy to just show you some things about your own product.
Anytime, I can learn a lot. Yeah.
The best part of that, because I was there at that moment, and the best part was the flat. Andy's giving Grant some tidbits of, if you do it this way, and Grant was like, "Hey, this isn't my first rodeo."
It was, and let me defend myself slightly there. Although I know my pride is so totally funny. Knocked on the whole thing, but it was specifically that we had video feedback on the share, and I knew how to do that. But Andy was giving me a tip on it. I was like, I got this, fixing that. But I didn't realize that he was the creator of the demo that I was showing to everybody. So that was. There's a lot of egg on my face.
No, it was good. It was good.
He was very gracious and said that it was great. And always has and great to have someone demo my own product. I learned, that's interesting to see what they're showing and what they're not showing.
I took notes. I learned a lot.
And it's amazing that we've gone from that first little introduction to now we're building this incredible thing together. So it's really exciting. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it. So, all right, thanks so much to the producers. Tons of great questions, tons of great input. We're going to look for it every week and just figure it out together. And then thanks to our panelists. We can't do this without you. And you guys did a great job as always. Everybody here made it a great conversation. Somehow we do this 500 and some X number of times. I can't ever keep count, but it's amazing. And we will see you all tomorrow. Universe. Go up to the website, take a look at it. Think of what you want to know about it. We have the developers on tomorrow. I'm pretty excited about it, and that they're integral to what we're doing. So it's definitely worth doing a little study. All right. We'll see you everybody tomorrow. And now I'm going to start after